Mom said my wedding had to be canceled because our family was facing absolute financial ruin. I believed her tears and gave up the most important day of my life to save the home I grew up in. But exactly 7 days later, my phone screen lit up with a notification that made my blood freeze. It was a 13-photo social media album showing my entire family sipping expensive cocktails at a five-star resort in Maui. I did not scream. I simply stared at the screen and waited. 2 hours later, my mother texted me begging for $50,000 in emergency bail money. What I texted back sealed their ultimate destruction. My name is Natalie, 33 years old, and I work as a financial risk analyst in downtown Chicago. Before I continue this story, let me know where you are watching from in the comments below. Hit like and subscribe if you have ever sacrificed your own happiness for toxic relatives who took advantage of your loyalty. I sat alone in the dim light of my apartment, my eyes locked on the custom silk wedding dress hanging lifelessly from the closet door. It was supposed to be worn this coming Saturday. Instead, it was a ghost of a future I had willingly surrendered. My fiancé Liam, a hard-working 35-year-old veterinarian who spent his long days saving sick animals and his nights trying to patiently save me from my own toxic family dynamics, had held me tightly while I cried for hours last week. My mother Patricia had shown up at our door sobbing hysterically. She claimed my father Richard made a terrible investment and the bank was foreclosing on their house. She begged me to cancel my wedding, take back the venue deposit, and help them survive. Being the dutiful daughter, I did exactly that. I gave up my dream. Now, sitting in the quiet apartment, my phone vibrated loudly against the glass coffee table. I picked it up. My younger sister Brittany had just posted a new photo album online. The title read, "Family Aloha Retreat." I clicked on it, my heart pounding against my ribs. The first photo showed my parents lounging in private cabanas holding frosty Mai Tais. The second picture featured Brittany and her husband Jamal, an African-American man who constantly bragged about being a tech startup founder, posing on a private luxury yacht. Jamal was wearing a brand new designer linen suit, grinning from ear to ear. They had flown first class. They were living like royalty just 1 week after my mother wept on my couch about being completely homeless. A cold, sharp clarity washed over me. I did not throw my phone. I did not burst into tears. My professional training had taught me to detach emotions from raw data. And the data right in front of me showed a massive, calculated betrayal. My family had not gone bankrupt. They simply spent my wedding money on a luxury vacation. I zoomed in on Jamal in the yacht photo. He wore a brand new solid gold Rolex. Jamal lacked a stable income, always chasing fake Silicon Valley ventures. Yet here he was, flaunting extreme wealth he did not earn. As I stared at the screen, a new text message popped up. It was from my mother. "Natalie, please help us. I know you are heartbroken about the wedding, but we have a massive emergency." Jamal got into a terrible altercation at the resort bar and the local police arrested him. They are holding him and the bail is set at $50,000. We do not have the liquid cash right now. Please, you have to save your sister's husband. If he gets a criminal record, his startup will be ruined. Send the money immediately. I read the words 3 times. They had used my ultimate sacrifice to fund their vacation, and now they wanted me to empty my savings to bail out my deadbeat brother-in-law. They thought I was still their gullible, obedient little girl. My sadness evaporated instantly, replaced by a razor-sharp focus. I did not mention the tropical photos. I typed out a very simple, calm response. "Mom, I am so sorry to hear that. Of course I will help you. But to do an instant international wire transfer of that massive size, the bank requires me to verify the source accounts. Send me your primary bank login details and Jamal's company tax identification number so I can push the money through the corporate portal right now." I hit send, setting the phone down on the table. 5 short minutes later, the login credentials, passwords, and the business identification number arrived directly in my inbox. They were so incredibly desperate and blindly arrogant that they willingly handed the master keys to their entire financial kingdom directly to a professional risk analyst. The trap was officially set, and they had absolutely no idea what was about to happen to them. I opened my laptop and pulled up the primary banking portal. The screen glowed against my face as I typed in my parents' username and password. With a single click, I bypassed the security wall. I took a deep breath, expecting to see a sea of red numbers, overdrawn accounts, and foreclosure notices. That was the story my mother had sold me while weeping on my couch. That was the reason my wedding was canceled. Instead, the dashboard loaded and displayed a checking account balance of $12,000. Their mortgage account was perfectly current. There were no missed payments. There was absolutely no bankruptcy. My eyes narrowed. I clicked on the transaction history, sorting the data by the last 30 days. My training as a financial risk analyst kicked in instantly. I stopped being a daughter and became an auditor. The numbers never lie, and these numbers were screaming a terrifying truth. 2 weeks ago, right before my mother staged her tearful breakdown, a massive incoming wire transfer had hit their checking account. The amount was exactly $80,000. I clicked on the origin details. My stomach twisted into a tight, hard knot. The money had come from a high-yield trust fund established by my late grandmother, Beatrice. That fund was set up strictly in my name. It was meant for my future. I navigated to the bank's digital document vault and pulled up the withdrawal authorization slip. The screen displayed a scanned PDF of a physical form. There on the bottom line was my signature. Except it was not mine. The loop on the capital N was too rigid, and the slant was completely wrong. My mother had forged my signature. She had stolen $80,000 of my inheritance right out from under me. I leaned closer to the screen, watching where the money flowed next. $25,000 was immediately wired to a luxury travel concierge service. That covered the first-class flights, the private cabanas, and the endless Mai Tais in Maui. My wedding money, my sacrifice, had funded a tropical paradise for the people who betrayed me. But that still left a massive chunk of the stolen funds. I tracked the next major outgoing transfer. $45,000 had been sent directly to a high-interest credit card company. I cross-referenced the account numbers using the business identification details Jamal had so foolishly provided. The credit card belonged to him. I dug into Jamal's corporate accounts. He loved to walk around family gatherings in tailored suits, talking loudly about venture capital and seed funding for his tech startup. But his corporate ledger was an absolute joke. It was not a tech startup. It was a personal slush fund. The transaction history showed zero revenue and massive expenses at VIP nightclubs, luxury car rental agencies, and offshore sports betting websites. Jamal was not a founder. He was a professional grifter burning through cash to maintain the illusion of massive success. And my parents had used my stolen inheritance to bail him out of his massive dirty debt. The financial autopsy revealed everything I ever needed to know about my place in this family. I scrolled through years of historical transfer logs. The pattern was glaringly obvious. Thousands of dollars flowed to my sister Brittany every single month. Transfers labeled as rent assistance, car payments, and boutique shopping allowances. She was the golden child, endlessly funded and protected. The cold, hard reality of the spreadsheet laid bare decades of emotional abuse. While I was pulling all-nighters to secure my degree and build a career, they were systematically draining whatever resources they could find to prop up my sister. Brittany never held a job for more than 3 months, yet she drove a brand-new luxury SUV. Now I knew exactly how she afforded it. My parents were willing to commit serious financial crimes just to ensure their precious youngest daughter and her deadbeat husband never had to face the real world. Meanwhile, I saw a transaction from 10 years ago where I had transferred $200 to my parents to pay them back for a used college textbook. They took my money then, and they were taking my money now. I was nothing but their personal ATM. I did not cry. Crying was a waste of precious energy, and it did not fix spreadsheets. Instead, my fingers flew across the keyboard. I hit download on every single PDF file. I saved the forged withdrawal slip. I exported the credit card payoff receipts, the vacation invoices, and Jamal's fraudulent corporate ledgers. I created a secure encrypted folder on my hard drive and dumped every piece of evidence inside. I backed it up to 2 separate cloud servers. They had handed me the exact rope I needed to hang them. My phone buzzed again. It was another text from my mother, asking if the $50,000 wire was ready yet. She was getting extremely impatient. She needed to pay off whatever mess Jamal had actually created at that resort bar. I picked up my phone and typed a carefully constructed lie. Mom, the corporate portal requires a secondary security clearance for international wires over $10,000. The funds are securely locked in my mutual fund, but it will take exactly 5 business days to clear the fraud prevention hold. Tell Jamal to sit tight. I have everything under control. I hit send and closed my laptop. They were going to come home expecting a massive payout. I was going to give them a very different kind of reckoning. 2 days later, a heavy, impatient knock echoed through my apartment. I walked to the front door and opened it to find my mother, Patricia, and my brother-in-law, Jamal, standing in the hallway. My mother immediately launched into a highly theatrical performance. She collapsed against the doorframe, burying her face in her hands and letting out a loud, ragged sob. "Oh, Natalie, it was completely traumatizing," she wailed, pushing past me into the living room. She threw herself onto my sofa, acting as if she had just survived a war zone, instead of a luxury tropical vacation paid for with my stolen inheritance. Jamal sauntered in right behind her. There was absolutely nothing traumatized about his demeanor. He looked like a man who had just won the lottery. He wore pristine white sneakers and a custom linen shirt. As he ran a hand over his perfectly groomed beard, the heavy gold Rolex caught the afternoon light streaming through my window. It was the exact watch I had seen in the social media photos. He did not even have the decency to hide it. I stood by the kitchen island, maintaining a neutral expression. "I am so sorry you had such a difficult time, Mom," I said, keeping my voice soft and even. "What exactly happened over there?" My mother wiped her dry eyes. "It was a complete nightmare," she said, waving her manicured hand dismissively. "The local authorities were so aggressive and uncooperative. We had to empty every single checking account we had just to get a temporary bond. We are completely tapped out, Natalie. We do not even have money for groceries this week." The sheer audacity of her lie was almost impressive. I knew exactly what their bank balances looked like. I had the PDF files sitting encrypted on my hard drive. Yet she sat there on my couch playing the victim on the very same weekend I was supposed to be walking down the aisle in my wedding dress. Jamal did not bother with the emotional manipulation. He stepped forward, checking the time on his stolen gold watch with an exaggerated flick of his wrist. "Look, Natalie, I appreciate you stepping up," he said, using that condescending tone he always reserved for me. "But I really need that $50,000 liquefied and transferred today. My startup Nexus Dynamics is about to close a massive Series A funding round with some heavy-hitting venture capitalists out of Silicon Valley. I cannot have this ridiculous resort misunderstanding hanging over my background check. You understand business, right? Just wire the cash." He was so incredibly arrogant. He actually believed his own delusions. He thought I was just a naive pencil pusher who would blindly fund his fake empire. I smiled at him, a polite corporate smile. "I completely understand, Jamal," I replied smoothly. "And I really want to help secure your funding round. But like I texted Mom earlier, the money is currently tied up in a high-yield mutual fund. Releasing $50,000 triggers a mandatory federal fraud prevention hold. The bank physically cannot release the funds for another 7 days." Jamal frowned, his jaw clenching in deep irritation. 7 days? Are you kidding me? I need capital right now. Cannot you just pull a fast loan against your retirement account or something? I shook my head, pretending to look helpless. "If I pull a loan, it will take even longer to process the paperwork. Just give it 7 days, Jamal. The money will be there, I promise you. He let out an exasperated sigh and shook his head like I had inconvenienced a billionaire. Fine, he snapped, crossing his arms. But you better stay on top of your bank. If my investors pull out because of this ridiculous delay, I am holding you personally responsible for the losses. My mother stood up, patting Jamal's arm to soothe his fake frustration. Thank you, Natalie, she sighed heavily. You are being a good sister. We will see you next week when the money clears. They walked out of my apartment without ever asking how I was doing. They did not mention my canceled wedding. They did not ask about my fiancé. They only cared about the payout. As the front door clicked shut, Liam walked out from the bedroom. He had heard every single word. His fists were clenched at his sides, and his face was red with barely contained fury. Natalie, he said, his voice shaking with anger. This is utter insanity. I saw the bank statements you downloaded. She forged your signature. He is committing massive financial fraud. We need to call the police right now and have them arrested before they do anything else. I turned to look at my future husband. He was a good man who believed in a fair justice system, but fairness was not going to fix what had been broken inside me. I walked over and placed my hands on his chest, feeling his rapid heartbeat. No, Liam. I said, my voice dropping to a cold, absolute whisper. If we call the police right now, they will just hire lawyers. They will cry and play the victims. They will twist the narrative and make it look like a terrible misunderstanding. They might do a few months in a white-collar facility, but they will still have their pride. I looked toward the door where my family had just stood. Jail is far too good for them, I told him. I do not just want them in handcuffs. I want to take their pride. I want to humiliate them in front of everyone they have ever tried to impress. They wanted to play a high-stakes financial game with me. Now, I am going to show them exactly why I do this for a living. By the time I poured my first cup of coffee the next morning, my phone was already vibrating off the kitchen counter. It was not an alert from the bank. It was the sound of a coordinated public execution. Brittany had never handled the word no very well. When she realized my fabricated 7-day bank hold meant her husband would not be getting a $50,000 cash injection that afternoon, she decided to weaponize her favorite tool, social media. She posted a highly edited 6-minute video simultaneously on TikTok and Facebook. I leaned against the counter and clicked play, watching my sister squeeze out perfectly timed tears while sitting in the driver's seat of her luxury SUV. She did not mention my stolen inheritance. She did not mention the 5-star Hawaii vacation that my canceled wedding paid for. She certainly did not mention the forged signature. Instead, she painted a masterpiece of modern manipulation tailored perfectly for the algorithm. It absolutely breaks my heart to say this publicly, she sniffled into the camera, wiping a fake tear from her cheek. But my husband Jamal is facing the total collapse of his tech startup because of pure corporate greed from inside our own family. My older sister is a wealthy financial analyst who makes a massive salary and sits on a mountain of cash. She is watching my black husband face systemic financial ruin and refusing to lend us a single dime out of pure spite. She hates seeing a strong man like him succeed, and she is letting his dream die just to punish us. The video was a masterclass in playing the victim. Within hours, it had thousands of views and hundreds of angry shares. Strangers were in the comments calling me a villain and demanding I be fired from my job. But the worst part was not the strangers. It was the flying monkeys. My phone screen became a relentless waterfall of toxic text messages and missed calls from extended family members. Aunt Susan left a blistering 3-minute voicemail calling me a cold-blooded monster who had forgotten where she came from. Uncle Robert texted me saying I was an absolute disgrace to the family name, and that my late grandmother would be ashamed of my disgusting selfishness. Cousins who had not spoken to me in 5 years suddenly felt entitled to blow up my inbox, demanding I write Jamal a check immediately to save the family from public embarrassment. My mother even commented on the video saying she was praying for my cold heart to thaw. Liam watched me delete a scathing paragraph from my cousin. His face was red with anger. He wanted me to post the forged bank documents online right then and there. He wanted me to defend myself and clear my name, but I shook my head and placed my hand over his. When your enemy is digging their own grave, you do not take away their shovel, I told him, setting my phone on silent and tossing it onto the sofa. Let them talk. Let them build this massive public stage. The louder they yell now, the harder they will fall when I finally pull the curtain back. I took my laptop into my home office and locked the door. While my family was busy trying to destroy my personal reputation on the internet, I decided it was time to completely dismantle Jamal's actual livelihood. I opened my professional risk assessment software and typed the name of his company Nexus Dynamics into the Federal Corporate Registry database. Jamal constantly claimed his startup was on the verge of a massive venture capital funding round. He told everyone who would listen that he had a thriving tech company disrupting the industry. But the data loading on my screen painted a completely different reality. Nexus Dynamics was not registered as a technology firm. It was registered as a limited liability shell company operating out of a virtual mailbox located in a rundown strip mall 3 towns over. I pulled the state tax filings for the past 3 years. The company had 0 reported income. There was no payroll history. There was no product development. There were no clients. It was a complete ghost ship. So how exactly was Jamal affording custom linen suits, first-class flights, and solid gold Rolex watches? I cross-referenced his corporate tax identification number with public federal lending databases. My jaw tightened as the search results populated. Jamal had not just maxed out high-interest credit cards. He had actively defrauded the United States government. During the recent economic relief initiatives, Jamal had submitted multiple fraudulent applications for Small Business Administration loans. He had officially claimed Nexus Dynamics had 12 full-time employees and required hundreds of thousands of dollars in payroll protection to survive. It was a massive federal lie, and the government had approved it. He had received a direct deposit of over $200,000 in federal relief funds. This was no longer just a family dispute over a stolen wedding fund. This was federal wire fraud. Jamal was not just a terrible brother-in-law. He was a federal criminal, and I was holding all of his receipts. By noon the next day, my family realized their social media smear campaign was not working. I had not responded to a single text message. I had not answered a single phone call. I simply let them scream into the digital void. But toxic people do not just give up when they are ignored. They look for a softer target. And in their twisted minds, the softest target available was my fiancé, Liam. Liam owned a highly successful independent veterinary clinic on the north side of the city. He had spent 10 years building his practice from the ground up, pouring every ounce of his energy into the animals he treated. He was right in the middle of examining a golden retriever when the heavy glass doors of his clinic swung open. My father, Richard, stormed into the waiting room. He did not care that there were 5 other clients sitting there with their pets. He did not care that the receptionist asked him to lower his voice. He marched straight up to the front desk and demanded to see Liam immediately. I arrived at the clinic exactly 10 minutes later, carrying a paper bag with sandwiches I had bought for our lunch date. As I pushed open the door, the sound of my father's booming voice echoed through the hallway. I froze, my hand still resting on the metal handle. You are going to marry into this family, so you need to start acting like a man who protects his family. My father was shouting, standing aggressively close to Liam, who had stepped out into the reception area to de-escalate the situation. Natalie is being completely unreasonable and locking up her bank accounts. Jamal needs that $50,000 today, Liam. Not next week. Today. Liam stood his ground, his posture rigid but his voice remarkably calm. Richard, you need to lower your voice and leave my clinic right now. This is a place of business and you are scaring my clients. I am not giving Jamal a single dime. My father scoffed, waving his hand dismissively around the pristine facility. Oh, please, Liam, do not give me that nonsense. You have plenty of assets. I saw that brand new ultrasound machine being delivered last month. It has to be worth at least $60,000. Sell it. Or sell that oversized pickup truck sitting in the parking lot. You can easily bridge the gap for Jamal's Series A funding round until Natalie's mutual fund clears. The sheer insanity of the demand actually made the receptionist gasp out loud. My father wanted my fiancé to sell his vital medical equipment to fund a fake tech startup operated by a federal criminal. I did not wait another second. I stepped fully into the waiting room, letting the heavy door slam shut behind me. He is not selling his truck, and he is certainly not selling his medical equipment, I said, my voice cutting through the tense air like a knife. My father spun around his face, turning a dark shade of crimson when he saw me. "There you are, Natalie," he spat, taking a threatening step in my direction. "How dare you ignore your mother and me? We raised you. We gave you everything. And now you are letting your sister suffer because you are too selfish to release a simple bank transfer. You need to tell your fiancé to step up and write a check right now." I walked past him and handed the lunch bag to the receptionist. Then I turned back to face the man who had secretly co-signed a fraudulent loan using the house I grew up in. I did not yell. I did not show an ounce of the rage boiling inside my chest. I kept my tone perfectly level, dropping my volume so he had to lean in to hear me. "Dad, I think you should leave right now," I said, looking him dead in the eyes. "I have spent the entire morning looking very closely at Jamal's corporate structure. Are you absolutely sure you want me digging any deeper into Nexus dynamics?" For a fraction of a second, the angry red color drained entirely from my father's face. His eyes darted nervously to the left. He recognized the tone in my voice. It was the exact same tone I used when I caught corporate executives embezzling funds during my risk assessment audits. He knew I was incredibly good at my job. "What are you talking about?" he stammered, his aggressive posture faltering slightly. "Nexus is a completely legitimate enterprise. Jamal is a visionary." "Is he?" I asked, tilting my head. "Then he should not need my fiancé to sell a truck to keep his lights on. Go home, Dad, and do not ever step foot in this clinic again." My father looked around the waiting room, suddenly aware that 5 strangers were staring at him with undisguised disgust. He tried to puff out his chest to save face, pointing a shaking finger at me. "You are going to regret this, Natalie. When Jamal is a millionaire, you will be begging us for a seat at the table." He turned and stormed out of the clinic, the glass door rattling in its frame. Liam let out a long, heavy sigh and pulled me into a tight hug. I rested my head against his chest, listening to his steady heartbeat. My father had tried to intimidate us, but he had just made a fatal error. His nervous reaction to the name Nexus Dynamics confirmed my worst suspicion. He knew exactly what Jamal was doing. He was not just a victim of a con artist. My father was a willing accomplice. I drove back to my apartment with a new level of absolute clarity. The profound sadness I had felt about my canceled wedding just a week ago was completely gone, replaced by a cold and calculating determination. I kissed Liam goodbye at the clinic and told him I had serious work to do. My father had practically confirmed that he was entangled in Jamal's fake corporate empire. Now it was time for me to find out exactly how deep the rot went. Back in my home office, I locked the door and booted up my encrypted work laptop. Earlier, I had only scratched the surface of Nexus Dynamics, doing a basic public registry search that showed 0 state tax revenue. Now it was time to unleash the full power of my profession. I logged into the enterprise risk assessment software my firm used to audit massive multinational corporations. I had clearance access to deep background financial databases that the general public did not even know existed. I typed Jamal's name and his business identification number into the master terminal and hit enter. The system aggregated data from the Internal Revenue Service, the Small Business Administration, and federal banking registries. The loading bar crawled across the screen, pulling in thousands of hidden data points. When the final master report populated, the sheer scale of the criminality took my breath away. Jamal had not just lied on a single application to get a quick cash infusion. He had orchestrated a highly sophisticated, multi-tiered federal fraud scheme. I opened the Paycheck Protection Program loan file first. During the height of the recent economic relief efforts, The government was rapidly expediting federal funds to keep small businesses afloat. Jamal had taken full advantage of a crisis. He had submitted pristine, perfectly forged quarterly tax documents, claiming Nexus Dynamics had a monthly payroll of $40,000. I ran a cross-reference check on the employee's social security numbers he had listed on the federal application. My software flagged them immediately in bright red font. They were synthetic identities. He had combined real names with fake social security numbers to invent a phantom workforce. He claimed to the federal government that he was paying six-figure salaries to senior software engineers and marketing directors. In reality, he was literally just wiring federal relief funds directly into offshore cryptocurrency wallets and dummy domestic checking accounts that he solely controlled. This was textbook wire fraud. By transmitting fraudulent loan applications and electronic fund transfers across state lines via the internet, Jamal had committed a federal felony punishable by up to 20 years in federal prison per count, and he did not stop there. I pulled his commercial bank fraud data. Jamal had opened 5 different corporate checking accounts across 3 different regional banks. He was rapidly moving the stolen federal money between them to obscure the origin of the funds. This process is known as layering, and it is a classic money laundering technique used by drug cartels and organized crime syndicates. He would move $10,000 here and $15,000 there, eventually pulling the cash out to fund his extravagant lifestyle. That was how he bought the solid gold Rolex. That was how he afforded the private cabanas in Maui. He was living like a Silicon Valley billionaire on the backs of American taxpayers. The payoff of my grueling career choice hit me hard in that moment. Years of studying late into the night, passing brutal financial licensing exams, and working 80-hour weeks analyzing corporate risk led me exactly to this chair. Any normal person looking at these hundreds of pages of bank statements would just see a confusing jumble of corporate jargon and routine transfers. They would get overwhelmed and give up. But I saw the matrix. I saw the exact structural blueprint of a criminal enterprise. Jamal actually thought he was a genius because he managed to trick an automated government approval system during a chaotic economic crisis. He walked around our family gatherings acting like he was the smartest man in the room, looking down on me because I worked a traditional corporate job. He had absolutely no idea he was leaving a digital footprint the size of a meteor crater, and he had just handed the map directly to a financial auditor. This was no longer just petty family drama about a stolen wedding fund or a ruined dress. This was a massive federal crime. But as I scrolled down to the final section of the Small Business Administration loan documents, my blood ran completely cold. The initial relief money was essentially a grant, but Jamal had also applied for a massive economic injury disaster loan to keep the scam going. That specific type of federal loan required physical collateral. A shell company with 0 assets and synthetic employees could not secure a loan of that magnitude on its own. The government required a personal guarantor. Someone with a pristine credit score and tangible assets had to co-sign the dotted line, and I knew exactly whose name I was about to find. I scrolled down to the final page of the commercial loan agreement. There, printed clearly in black ink, was the name of the personal guarantor, Richard Thomas, my father. He had pledged the entire equity of my childhood home to secure a massive federal disaster loan for a fake company. He had handed over the deed to our 4-bedroom house to subsidize Jamal's imaginary tech empire. I pulled up the county property tax records and cross-referenced them with the bank lien database. The puzzle pieces snapped into place, creating a terrifying picture. My mother had stood in my living room crying real tears about the bank taking their house. She had used that exact threat to manipulate me into canceling my wedding. The truly sickening part was that she was actually telling the truth about the foreclosure threat, but she completely lied about the reason. My father had not made a bad investment. He had willingly chained his financial survival to a federal grifter. I navigated back to the loan servicing portal to check the current repayment status. Jamal was supposed to be making monthly payments of $4,000 to pay down the principal. Instead, the screen glared at me with bright red warning banners. Account delinquent. 90 days past due. Jamal had not made a single payment in 3 months. While he was busy renting private yachts in Hawaii and buying solid gold Rolex watches, he was letting my parents' mortgage slip into default. I clicked on the most recent correspondence log between the bank and my father. An automated pre-foreclosure notice had been generated and mailed to their address exactly 10 days ago. The timeline was undeniably clear. My parents received the foreclosure notice and panicked. But instead of confronting Jamal and demanding he sell his luxury cars to save their home, they decided to rob me. They forged my signature to steal my $80,000 trust fund. And what did they do with my stolen inheritance? Did they immediately pay off the bank to save their house? No. They gave $45,000 to Jamal to clear his personal credit card debt so he could keep up his wealthy founder persona. They spent $25,000 on a luxury vacation to Hawaii to escape their miserable reality. They literally threw me under the bus and drained my entire future just to buy themselves a few more weeks of pretending everything was perfect. They were protecting the exact person who was actively destroying them. They loved my sister Brittany so much that they were willing to become homeless rather than admit her husband was a total fraud. They viewed my life, my happiness, and my hard-earned money as completely expendable resources. I was just collateral damage in their desperate attempt to maintain the illusion of a perfect family. I leaned back in my office chair, staring at the glowing monitor. A heavy, profound silence filled the room. For 33 years, I had tried so hard to be the good daughter. I got the perfect grades, I built a lucrative career, and I never asked them for a single favor. I thought if I just worked hard enough and caused zero problems, they would eventually respect me. But looking at these foreclosure documents, I finally understood the truth. To them, I was not a daughter. I was a financial safety net designed to catch them when their golden child inevitably failed. My phone vibrated on the desk, pulling me out of my thoughts. It was a new text message from my mother. It read, "Natalie, your father came home from the clinic very upset. Liam was extremely disrespectful to him today. You need to apologize and you need to get that bank hold lifted immediately. Jamal is losing patience and this family is hanging by a thread. Do the right thing for once." I read her message twice. She was still trying to dictate the terms of my life while standing on the deck of a sinking ship. She had no idea that I was currently looking at the torpedo that was about to blow her entire world apart. I did not reply to her text. Instead, I opened a new secure folder on my desktop and named it Pre-Foreclosure Evidence. I dragged the delinquent loan statements and the property lien documents into the folder right next to the forged trust fund withdrawal slip. My arsenal was growing by the minute and the endgame was approaching. The next morning, I arrived at my office building in the financial district perfectly on time. My firm occupied the top 10 floors of a sleek glass skyscraper. The lobby was a massive expanse of polished white marble and chrome, a place where quiet professionalism was the absolute rule. I was standing near the secure elevator banks, holding a cup of black coffee and discussing a quarterly risk portfolio with my managing director, David. David was a brilliant, no-nonsense executive who valued raw data and loyalty above everything else. He knew I was the best analyst on his floor, and he respected me immensely for it. We were deep in conversation about offshore market fluctuations when a sudden shrill voice shattered the quiet hum of the lobby. "There she is. There is the monster." I turned around slowly. Pushing past a bewildered lobby concierge was my mother. Patricia was wearing a designer trench coat and holding her expensive leather handbag, marching across the pristine marble floor like a general going into battle. Her face was flushed, and she had intentionally messed up her hair to look frantic and distressed. 2 building security guards were hurrying behind her, trying to grab her arms, but she dodged them, screaming at the top of her lungs. "She is letting her family starve!" my mother shrieked, pointing a trembling finger directly at me. "Do you all know who you are working with? She is a selfish, greedy sociopath. We are losing our home and she is sitting on a mountain of cash, refusing to help her own flesh and blood. Dozens of high-level executives, investment bankers, and corporate lawyers stopped in their tracks. The entire lobby fell dead silent, except for the echoing sound of my mother's theatrical sobs. She had clearly planned this ambush, thinking she could weaponize my professional environment against me. In her twisted mind, public humiliation was the ultimate leverage. She assumed I would be so terrified of losing my corporate job that I would drag her into a private conference room and immediately authorize the $50,000 wire transfer just to make her go away. She severely miscalculated. I did not blush. I did not shrink away. I did not rush forward to hush her. I simply stood there holding my coffee cup, watching her throw a toddler-level tantrum in the middle of a Fortune 500 financial firm. I looked at her the exact same way I looked at Jamal's fraudulent tax returns. She was just another bad investment that needed to be liquidated. "Natalie, do you know this woman?" David asked, his voice perfectly calm but laced with a dangerous edge. "Unfortunately, yes," I replied, keeping my eyes locked on my mother. "She is my mother. And she is currently having a severe mental breakdown because I refused to fund her son's illegal activities." My mother gasped, clutching her pearls in a dramatic display of fake shock. "How dare you lie?" she wailed, stepping closer. "I am your mother. I gave you life. You owe me everything. Tell your bank to release those funds right now, or I will stand here all day and tell everyone what a horrible person you truly are." Before I could even open my mouth to respond, David stepped elegantly in front of me, blocking her path. He was 6 feet tall and carried the terrifying authority of a man who controlled billions of dollars in corporate assets. "Ma'am, you have exactly 10 seconds to exit this building," David said, his voice echoing sharply across the marble floor. My mother glared at him, her theatrical tears instantly vanishing, replaced by pure venom. "Excuse me, do not tell me what to do. I am speaking to my ungrateful daughter. Who do you think you are?" "I am her managing director," David replied coldly. "And I am the person authorizing building security to place you under citizen's arrest for trespassing and disturbing the peace." He snapped his fingers and pointed at the 2 security guards who had finally caught up. "Call the Chicago Police Department immediately," he ordered. "Tell them we have a hostile intruder threatening an employee. Press full criminal charges." My mother's eyes went wide with genuine panic. The threat of actual police involvement shattered her fake victim persona instantly. She knew she could not play her games with armed police officers, especially when she had just committed felony forgery 2 weeks ago. She took a rapid step backward, her designer heels clicking loudly against the marble. "You are all crazy," she spat, her voice shaking with rage. "You deserve each other. You are going to burn in hell for this, Natalie. You hear me? You are dead to me." She turned around and practically sprinted toward the revolving glass doors, shoving past a group of startled interns. The security guards shadowed her all the way out to the sidewalk, ensuring she was entirely off corporate property. The heavy silence returned to the lobby. David turned to look at me, adjusting his expensive silk tie. "Do you need to take the rest of the day off, Natalie?" he asked, his tone softening just a fraction. I took a slow sip of my coffee, feeling a profound sense of absolute liberation wash over me. "No, David. I am perfectly fine," I replied. "In fact, I have never felt more focused in my entire life." As the elevator doors opened and we stepped inside, I realized something fundamental had just shifted inside my chest. Any lingering shred of guilt or familial obligation had been completely eradicated by her public performance. She had tried to destroy my livelihood to protect a criminal. There was no saving them. They would gladly burn my entire life down just to keep themselves warm. The gloves were completely off, and I was ready to deliver the final blow. When I returned to my apartment that evening, the adrenaline from the lobby confrontation had settled into a sharp, icy calm. I walked into the lobby of my building and opened my small metal mailbox. Sitting right on top of the usual pile of utility bills and junk flyers was a thick, heavy envelope. It was crafted from expensive cream-colored cardstock and sealed with a heavy stamp of gold wax. I carried it upstairs and tossed my keys onto the kitchen island. I slid my finger under the flap and pulled out the contents. It was a formal event invitation. The paper was so thick it felt like a piece of cardboard, and the cursive font was pressed into the surface with shiny gold foil. The text read, "Patricia and Richard Thomas joyfully request the pleasure of your company for a grand gala celebrating their 35th wedding anniversary." My eyes scanned down the elegant cursive letters to read the location and the date. My breath caught in my throat. I had to read the line 3 times just to make sure my eyes were not deceiving me. The venue was the Oakbrook Heritage Country Club, and the date was this upcoming Saturday evening. A wave of pure, absolute disbelief washed over me. Oakbrook Heritage was not just any random high-end venue. It was the exact luxury country club where Liam and I were supposed to get married. The sheer audacity of the betrayal struck me like a physical blow. The puzzle pieces rapidly clicked together in my analytical mind. When my mother had cried on my couch claiming they were losing the house, she had begged me to cancel the wedding immediately. I had called the venue coordinator, crying my eyes out, to release the reservation. And what did my mother do the very next day? She called that exact same coordinator. She swooped in and claimed my abandoned date. She used the $80,000 she stole from my grandmother's trust fund to pay the massive catering minimums and the live entertainment deposits. She had literally stolen my wedding day. She had taken my dream venue, my specific weekend, and my inheritance to throw herself a massive narcissism-fueled party. I stood in the quiet kitchen, staring at the gold foil lettering. They were going to stand in the exact ballroom where I was supposed to have my first dance with Liam. They were going to drink expensive champagne and accept gifts from all the aunts and uncles who had spent the last 3 days leaving me abusive voicemails. They were going to celebrate their fake wealth and their fake perfect marriage, while Jamal paraded around in his stolen Rolex, and my father actively ignored his impending foreclosure. The disrespect had reached its absolute peak. It was no longer just greed. It was a pathological need to completely erase my happiness so they could shine brighter. I heard the front door unlock and Liam walked in carrying his veterinary scrubs in a gym bag. He took one look at my face and immediately dropped his bag. "What happened?" he asked, rushing over to the kitchen island. "Did they come to your office?" I pushed the heavy cream-colored invitation across the marble counter. "Read it," I said quietly. Liam picked up the card. His eyes darted across the gold text. I watched his expression shift from confusion to realization and finally to pure, unadulterated rage. His knuckles turned white as he gripped the thick paper. He looked up at me, his jaw clenched so tight a muscle ticked in his cheek. "Natalie, this is sick," he whispered. "This is genuinely sick. They stole your money to throw themselves a party at your wedding venue, on our wedding weekend." "I know," I replied, my voice completely devoid of emotion. "We are not going," Liam said firmly, tossing the invitation back onto the counter like it was covered in poison. "I am not letting you walk into that room. It is a calculated ambush. They sent this to you just to rub it in your face. They want you to sit at home crying while they drink champagne on your dime." I walked over to the kitchen drawer and pulled out a sleek, black ink pen. I picked up the small RSVP card that had been tucked inside the envelope. "You are absolutely right, Liam," I said, uncapping the pen. "They want me to sit at home and cry. They think I am too broken and too embarrassed by the social media smear campaign to ever show my face in public again. They think they have completely won." I pressed the pen to the heavy paper. I placed a bold, dark checkmark next to the line that read, "Joyfully accept." Then I wrote the number 2 on the line, indicating the number of attending guests. "What are you doing?" Liam asked, staring at me in disbelief. I slid the RSVP card into its pre-stamped return envelope and sealed it shut. I looked up at the man I loved. "I am giving them exactly what they want, Liam. I am giving them an audience." They had spent the entire week building a massive stage to show off their fake empire. They had invited every single relative, every family friend, and every person who had called me a selfish monster. It was the perfect concentration of every toxic person in my life, trapped inside a single ballroom. It was the perfect place to detonate the bomb I had been carefully building. "We are going to that gala," I told him, picking up the envelope, "and we are going to burn their entire house of cards to the ground." The very next morning, I took a personal day off from work. I did not spend it resting or crying over my cancelled wedding. I spent it building an airtight legal cage. At exactly 9 o'clock, I walked through the heavy glass doors of the main bank branch downtown. Because I managed massive corporate accounts for my firm, the branch manager, Mr. Henderson, cleared his entire morning schedule to meet with me privately. I sat across from him in his quiet office and placed my laptop on his mahogany desk. I did not mince words. I told him $80,000 had been stolen from my grandmother's trust fund. His face went pale as I pulled up the forged withdrawal slip on my screen. Mr. Henderson immediately called in the bank's internal fraud specialist and a licensed notary public. We spent the next 2 hours conducting a forensic deep dive into the transaction. The fraud specialist pulled the back-end data logs from the day the transfer was initiated. The system captured the exact IP address of the device that submitted the forged document. It was not my secure home network or my office terminal. It was the exact IP address registered to my parents' residential internet provider. The digital footprint was indisputable. My mother had logged into the portal from her own living room. The notary public placed an official affidavit on the desk in front of me. I raised my right hand, swore an oath, and signed the document legally, certifying that I did not authorize the liquidation of the trust fund. The notary stamped it with a heavy official seal. With that single piece of paper, the withdrawal officially transformed from a family dispute into felony identity theft and major embezzlement. Mr. Henderson handed me a thick manila folder containing the certified IP logs, the notarized affidavit, and the bank fraud report. He assured me the bank's legal team would cooperate fully with law enforcement. I left the bank and drove straight to the local police precinct. I walked into the sterile, brightly lit lobby and asked to speak with someone in the Financial Crimes Division. 10 minutes later, I was sitting in a cramped, windowless office across from Detective Miller, a seasoned investigator who looked like he had seen every scam in the book. I opened my manila folder and slid the stack of certified bank documents across his desk. I did not give him an emotional sob story. I gave him cold, hard facts. I explained the timeline of the forged signature, the IP address match, and the subsequent wire transfers that funded a luxury Hawaiian vacation and paid off my brother-in-law's credit card debt. Detective Miller reviewed the documents in absolute silence. When he finally looked up, his expression was a mix of shock and professional respect. "You basically did my entire job for me," he said, tapping the paper with his pen. "This is a completely airtight case of felony embezzlement and identity fraud. We can send a squad car to their house and arrest your mother right now." I shook my head, holding up my hand to stop him. "No, Detective. I want to file the official police report and get a formal case number today, but I need you to hold the arrest warrant for exactly 3 days." He frowned, leaning back in his chair. "That is a highly unusual request. Why do you want to delay an active felony arrest?" I reached into my purse and pulled out the thick cream-colored envelope I had received in the mail the day before. I placed the gold-foiled invitation on his desk, right next to the evidence of their crimes. Because, Detective, they used the stolen money to throw a massive 35th anniversary gala this Saturday night. They invited our entire extended family and everyone they want to impress. If you arrest my mother today, she will quietly post bail and play the victim. She will spin a web of lies and tell everyone I set her up out of pure spite. I leaned forward, resting my elbows on his desk. But if the warrant goes live on Saturday night, she will have nowhere to hide. I want her to face the consequences of her actions in front of every single person she bought with my money. I need the stage to be perfectly set. Detective Miller stared at the gold foil invitation and then looked back at me. A slow, understanding smile spread across his face. He recognized the absolute precision of my plan. He typed my information into his computer and printed out an official police report. He handed me a business card with a long, formal case number printed on it. The silent report is officially filed, he told me, handing over the paperwork. The warrant will be processed and signed by a judge tomorrow morning. But I will personally ensure it is not executed until Saturday evening. Enjoy the party, Natalie. I walked out of the police precinct and into the bright Chicago sunlight, holding the case number tightly in my hand. My mother thought she was the one orchestrating a grand performance. She had no idea I was the one writing the final act. Half of my arsenal was completely locked and loaded. Now all I had to do was make sure Jamal's federal crimes were handled with the exact same level of total destruction. I drove straight from the police precinct back to my apartment and locked myself inside my home office. The state-level embezzlement charges against my mother were child's play compared to what Jamal was doing. I opened the digital folder labeled Nexus Dynamics. The file contained hundreds of pages of synthetic employee identities, forged quarterly tax documents, and offshore cryptocurrency wallet transfers. It was a complete roadmap of his federal crimes against the Small Business Administration. If you just submit a tip to a generic government hotline, your file will sit in a digital queue for months. It might take a full year before a low-level analyst even looks at it. Jamal did not have a year. Jamal had exactly 3 days. So I bypassed the standard reporting system completely. I scrolled through my professional contacts and found Agent Thomas Reed. He was a senior forensic accountant for the Office of Inspector General. We had crossed paths 2 years ago during a massive corporate audit where my firm assisted the federal government in taking down a corrupt hedge fund manager. Reed was ruthless, brilliant, and absolutely despised white-collar criminals who stole federal relief money. I called his direct line and he answered on the second ring. I did not waste time with small talk. I told him I had a fully packaged wire fraud and bank fraud case involving a fraudulent shell company that had illegally secured over $200,000 in Paycheck Protection Program and economic injury, disaster loan funds. I explained how the stolen money was being layered across 5 regional banks to buy luxury watches and fund personal vacations. Reed's tone shifted instantly from friendly to purely professional. He gave me a secure federal email server link and told me to upload the entire encrypted folder. I hit send and waited on the line while he opened the files. I could hear him typing rapidly on his keyboard as his eyes scanned the data I had aggregated. "Natalie, this is incredibly thorough," Reed finally said, his voice tight with focused energy. "The synthetic identities alone are enough to trigger an immediate federal indictment. Because the stolen amount is well over the $200,000 threshold, this automatically gets flagged as a high-priority major economic crime. I am looping in the Federal Bureau of Investigation Financial Crimes Task Force right now. We are going to freeze all 5 of these corporate accounts by the end of the business day." Freezing those accounts meant Jamal was officially cut off from his stolen money. But I needed to make sure they physically apprehended him in the most public way possible. "Agent Reed, there is one more thing you need to know," I said, leaning closer to the microphone on my desk. "The guarantor on the fraudulent disaster loan is my father. The suspect Jamal is my brother-in-law. He is extremely flight risk capable. If you freeze his accounts today, he will panic and try to run. He might try to board an international flight by the weekend." I heard the sharp intake of breath on the other end of the line. "Where is he right now?" Reed asked. I picked up the cream-colored invitation from my desk. "He is at my sister's house," I explained. "But if you want to catch him while he is completely off guard and surrounded by the very people he has been lying to, I know exactly where he will be this Saturday night at 8 o'clock. I read the address of the Oak Brook Heritage Country Club to the federal agent. I explained that it was a highly publicized family gala and that Jamal would be there wearing his stolen gold Rolex, pretending to be a millionaire tech founder. I told Reed it was an open ballroom with multiple exits, but the main entrance would be perfectly clear for a tactical approach. Reed let out a low whistle. "A high society country club gala. That is bold. I will forward the venue logistics to the arresting team." We will have agents positioned outside the country club before the appetizers are even served. Thank you for the silver platter, Natalie. I hung up the phone and closed my laptop. My heart was beating with a slow, steady rhythm. The bank accounts were frozen. The police report for my mother was filed. The federal warrant for Jamal was actively being drafted by the Office of Inspector General. I had taken their greed and their arrogance and turned it into a perfectly synchronized weapon. I walked out of my office and went into my bedroom to look at my closet. My wedding dress was still hanging there, a painful reminder of what they stole from me. I pushed it aside and reached for a sleek, sharp designer power suit. I was not going to be a bride this weekend. I was going to be an executioner. Thursday morning arrived with a bitter chill in the Chicago air. With only 2 days left until the anniversary gala, my schedule was meticulously planned. I decided to step out of my apartment to grab a quick espresso at the local corner cafe while Liam waited outside in his truck taking a business call. I was sitting in a quiet leather booth near the back reviewing the digital confirmation of the federal freeze order on my phone. Everything was proceeding exactly according to my timeline. Suddenly, a shadow fell across my table. I looked up and saw my younger sister Brittany standing over me. She did not look like the golden child who had been posting glamorous photos from Maui just a few days ago. Her perfectly styled blonde hair was messy, and the dark circles under her eyes betrayed a deep, creeping panic. She had clearly tracked my location, knowing this was my regular morning coffee spot. Without asking for permission, she slid into the booth opposite me, crossing her arms defensively. "Listen to me very carefully, Natalie," she hissed, leaning across the small wooden table. "We have a massive problem, and you are going to fix it right now." I locked my phone screen and placed it face down. I took a slow sip of my black coffee, keeping my expression completely neutral. "What kind of problem, Brittany? Did the resort in Hawaii charge you an extra fee for the stolen towels?" Her face contorted with pure rage, but she forced herself to keep her voice low. "Jamal's corporate bank accounts are completely frozen," she whispered frantically. "He woke up this morning and tried to pay the final vendor invoices for the anniversary gala on Saturday, and the bank locked him out. He spent 2 hours screaming at customer service, but they refused to tell him anything. They just said it was a mandatory compliance hold. He cannot access a single dime." I felt a cold thrill of absolute satisfaction course through my veins. Agent Reed had worked faster than I anticipated. The federal net was already tightening around Jamal's neck, and they were completely suffocating. But instead of realizing they were under federal investigation, they simply thought it was a banking error. "That sounds incredibly stressful," I replied, my voice dripping with mock sympathy. "But I failed to see how his fake company having frozen assets is my responsibility." "Because the gala is in 2 days," Brittany snapped, slamming her hand flat against the table. "The caterers and the floral designers are demanding their final payments in cash by noon today, or they are walking out. We do not have the liquidity right now because you locked up your mutual fund, so you are going to give us your car." I blinked, staring at her in genuine disbelief. "My car." "Yes, your car," she demanded, pointing out the large glass window toward the street, where my nearly brand-new luxury Audi was parked. "Hand over the keys and the pink slip title right now. Jamal has a friend at a luxury auto dealership who will buy it for cash under the table this afternoon. We will use the cash to pay the gala vendors and keep Jamal's business afloat until the bank lifts the freeze. You live in the city anyway. You can just take the train to work." The sheer, unadulterated entitlement of her demand was staggering. She was not just asking me to fund their party. She wanted me to sign over my primary mode of transportation to a federal criminal so they could keep up appearances for their high society friends. I looked at her frantic, desperate face. And then I started to laugh. It was not a chuckle. It was a loud, genuine laugh that echoed through the quiet coffee shop. Several patrons turned their heads to look at our booth. "You are completely out of your mind, Brittany," I said, wiping a tear of amusement from the corner of my eye. "I am not giving your grifter husband my car. Tell Mom to cancel the party. Tell the vendors the truth. You are all completely broke," Brittany snapped. The reality of her crumbling world collided with her massive ego, and she lost whatever fragile grip she had left on her sanity. She grabbed her large steaming cup of hot latte from the table and hurled it directly at me. The scalding liquid hit my chest, splashing violently across my face and completely ruining my expensive wool winter coat. The heavy ceramic cup clattered loudly onto the wooden table, spilling coffee everywhere. A collective gasp ripped through the cafe. The barista behind the counter dropped a metal pitcher in shock. The heavy glass door of the cafe swung open violently. Liam had seen the entire altercation through the front window. He sprinted inside, his face dark with fury. He did not yell or physically attack her. Instead, he instantly pulled out his smartphone and started snapping rapid-fire, high-resolution photos. He photographed my ruined coat, my red scalded skin, and the coffee dripping from the table. He turned the camera and photographed the stunned witnesses sitting at the adjacent tables. Finally, he shoved the phone right into Brittany's terrified face and took a clear shot of her standing there with the empty cup. "Are you completely insane?" Liam shouted, his voice echoing off the brick walls. "That is criminal battery. I have 5 witnesses and photographic proof." Brittany stumbled backward, her eyes wide with sudden terror as she realized the massive legal mistake she had just made. She looked at the angry patrons who were already pulling out their own phones to record her. I calmly picked up a napkin from the dispenser and wiped the hot coffee from my cheek. I did not flinch from the burning pain. I looked directly into my sister's terrified eyes and offered her a chilling, perfectly calm smile. "That was your last mistake," I whispered. Brittany turned around and sprinted out of the coffee shop, disappearing into the busy Chicago street. She thought she had just lost an argument. She had absolutely no idea she had just handed me the final nail for her own coffin. Liam and I spent the next 15 minutes collecting the contact information of the witnesses in the cafe. The barista even offered us the security camera footage, which Liam gladly downloaded directly to his phone. We walked back to his truck in silence, the crisp Chicago wind biting through my ruined coat. I did not care about the dark stains soaking into the wool. The coat was just fabric, but the massive legal leverage I had just gained was absolute gold. I had just finished changing into a clean sweater back at my apartment when my phone vibrated loudly on the kitchen counter. It was a massive block of text from Jamal. Brittany had clearly run straight home to him, crying about the coffee shop incident and conveniently leaving out the part where she violently assaulted me. But Jamal was not texting to defend his wife. He was texting because his bank accounts were still frozen and his panic was rapidly transforming into aggressive delusion. "Listen to me very carefully, you arrogant corporate drone," the text began. "Brittany told me you are spreading vicious rumors about my business and trying to interfere with my banking relationships. I do not know what kind of strings you pulled at your little accounting firm, but I have retained top-tier legal counsel. I am filing a massive lawsuit against you for defamation of a corporate entity and tortious interference. By the time my lawyers are done with you, I will own your apartment, your investments, and your fiancé's veterinary clinic. You will be completely bankrupt. Unfreeze my accounts right now, or I will serve you with papers tomorrow." I stood in the kitchen and read the paragraph twice. It was a fascinating study in criminal psychology. He was completely backed into a corner, cut off from his stolen funds, and yet his ego still demanded he play the powerful tech billionaire. He actually believed he could intimidate a senior financial risk analyst with meaningless legal buzzwords. Defamation of a corporate entity was not even a real legal term in the context he was trying to use it. I did not type a long emotional paragraph defending myself. I did not engage in a digital screaming match. Predators feed on fear and emotional reactions, and I was not going to give him a single ounce of either. Instead, I unlocked my secure laptop and opened the encrypted folder labeled Nexus Dynamics. I pulled up the most damning document I had found. It was the official federal record showing his 90-day delinquency on the Small Business Administration loan, completely exposing his fake shell company and the synthetic employee identities. Right next to it on the screen, I opened a digital copy of United States Code Title 18 Section 1343, which clearly outlined the federal penalties for wire fraud, punishable by up to 20 years in federal prison. I used my snipping tool to take a clean, high-resolution screenshot of both documents side by side. I attached the single image to my text message thread with Jamal. I did not add a caption. I did not add a threatening message. I just hit send. I set the phone face up on the marble counter and watched the screen. For a solid minute, there was absolutely nothing. No typing bubble, no read receipt. And then the psychological collapse began. The typing bubble appeared, disappeared, and appeared again. He was frantic. He was trying to formulate a lie, a threat, an excuse, but his brain was completely short-circuiting. The reality that I had his federal records had just shattered his entire fake universe. Then the phone started ringing. Jamal's name flashed across the screen. I let it ring until it went to voicemail. 10 seconds later, it rang again, and again. He called 6 times in less than 3 minutes. He was suffocating on his own panic. Finally, a voicemail notification popped up. I tapped the speaker icon. Natalie? Hey, Natalie, listen. His voice was completely stripped of its previous arrogance. It was high-pitched, breathless, and trembling with genuine terror. We need to talk. That document you sent is just a clerical error. My accountant made a massive mistake. Please pick up the phone. You cannot show that to anyone. Let us just sit down and figure this out quietly. Please, Natalie, do not do anything crazy. I smiled a cold, empty smile. He was begging. The powerful tech founder was reduced to a whimpering mess in less than 5 minutes. I did not call him back. I pressed the information icon next to his name, scrolled to the bottom of the screen, and tapped block caller. I did the exact same thing for Brittany, my mother, and my father. I was completely cutting off all communication. The psychological torture had officially begun. For the next 48 hours, Jamal would be trapped inside his own mind. He would jump at every siren sweat through his tailored shirts and constantly look over his shoulder. He would have to walk into that country club on Saturday night, pretending to be a wealthy success story, all while knowing that a ticking time bomb was strapped directly to his chest. And he knew that I was the one holding the detonator. It was Saturday evening. The sun was dipping below the Chicago skyline, casting long, dramatic shadows across our bedroom floor. Tonight was supposed to be the exact night I put on my custom silk wedding dress. I was supposed to be standing in front of a mirror, with my mother adjusting my veil, while my sister pretended to be genuinely happy for me. Instead, the white silk dress remained sealed inside its opaque garment bag, hanging silently in the darkest corner of my closet. I did not even look in its direction. The naive woman who eagerly bought that dress was completely dead. She died the exact moment she saw the tropical vacation photos and realized her entire life was a sacrificial offering for her toxic family. I walked past the closet and reached for a heavy black velvet hanger. I was not going to a celebration tonight. I was dressing for a funeral. I pulled out a razor-sharp tailored designer power suit. It was a deep midnight blue with a structured blazer that fit my shoulders like custom armor and wide-leg trousers that commanded absolute authority. I paired it with a crisp white silk blouse buttoned perfectly and sharp stiletto heels that clicked against the hardwood floor like the steady ticking of a bomb timer. I pulled my dark hair back into a severe, elegant knot at the very base of my neck. I applied a bold, dark crimson lipstick. When I looked in the full-length mirror, I did not see a victim or a discarded daughter. I saw a senior financial risk analyst preparing to completely liquidate a toxic asset. I walked into my home office to gather my specific weapons. I unplugged my corporate tablet from its charging station, making absolutely sure the battery was at a perfect 100%. I wiped the glass screen completely clean of any smudges. I opened my sleek black leather briefcase and carefully placed the tablet inside the padded sleeve. Next to it, I packed a small wireless HDMI dongle. I had visited the Oakbrook Heritage Country Club 3 different times during my own wedding planning process, so I knew exactly what kind of audio-visual equipment they utilized in their grand ballroom. They had a massive drop-down, high-definition projector screen positioned directly behind the main speaker stage. That massive screen was going to be my digital canvas tonight. Liam emerged from the guest bathroom wearing a perfectly tailored charcoal gray suit. He looked incredibly handsome, but his eyes held a fierce, unyielding, protective intensity. He walked over to me and gently placed his hands on my shoulders, looking at my reflection in the dark mirror. He did not ask me if I was absolutely sure about this plan. He did not try to talk me down or suggest we take the high road. He knew exactly what had to be done to cure this disease. "We are going to end this tonight," he said, his voice steady and deeply resolute. I nodded slowly, sliding the leather briefcase shut with a satisfying sharp metallic click. "Yes, we are." We left the quiet apartment and walked down to the subterranean parking garage. The drive to the Oakbrook Heritage Country Club took exactly 45 minutes. The city streetlights blurred past the windows of Liam's truck as we merged onto the main highway. The silence inside the cabin was heavy, but it was not uncomfortable. It was the cold, calculating calm before a massive, destructive storm. I stared out the passenger window, watching the headlights of oncoming traffic, and allowed my analytical mind to drift back over the last 33 years of my existence. For my entire life, I had been chained to a fundamental societal lie. The lie that blood automatically dictates family. Society relentlessly conditions us to believe that you must forgive your parents and siblings no matter how severely they abuse you simply because you share the exact same DNA sequence. But blood is just biology. It is a completely random scientific coincidence. True family is not determined by a birth certificate or a shared last name. True family is defined by mutual respect, unwavering loyalty, and the active daily choice to protect one another from harm. My parents and my sister had never once made that choice for me. They had repeatedly chosen themselves. They had willingly chosen a federal grifter with a fake technology startup over my entire future. I realized in that quiet truck cabin that by destroying their fake empire tonight, I was not betraying my family. I was finally defending myself. I was surgically severing a rotting, diseased limb so the rest of my life could actually heal and grow properly. I was taking back my agency and my power. The lingering fear of public judgment, the deeply ingrained anxiety of being the bad daughter, the guilt of not being enough, all of it evaporated completely into the cold night air. For the first time in my life, I was choosing myself. Liam turned the steering wheel smoothly, and the heavy truck rolled past the massive wrought iron gates of the country club. The sprawling estate was brilliantly illuminated with hundreds of expensive golden string lights wrapping around the ancient oak trees. Valet attendants in crisp white uniforms were rushing around, parking long lines of luxury vehicles. I could hear the faint, elegant sound of a live jazz band drifting out from the grand ballroom. My mother had spared absolutely no expense using my stolen money. Liam parked the truck and turned off the engine. We sat there for a brief moment looking at the glowing, opulent entrance. "Showtime," I whispered. We stepped out of the truck and handed the keys to the valet. The crisp evening air felt electric against my skin. Liam placed his hand firmly on the small of my back, a silent anchor of support, as we walked through the towering glass doors of the Oakbrook Heritage Country Club. The grand ballroom was a masterpiece of stolen wealth. Crystal chandeliers hung from the vaulted ceilings, casting a warm golden glow over 150 formally dressed guests. Massive centerpieces of white cascading roses and expensive orchids adorned every single table. I recognized the floral design immediately. It was the exact arrangement I had painstakingly picked out for my wedding reception 6 months ago. The sheer audacity of the visual theft was staggering, but it did not break me. It only sharpened my focus. As Liam and I walked down the sweeping carpeted staircase, the lively chatter in the room began to falter. A ripple of sharp whispers spread through the massive crowd like a shockwave. Heads turned, eyes stared, conversations died mid-sentence. These were the exact same aunts, uncles, and distant cousins who had flooded my phone with toxic voicemails, calling me a greedy monster for abandoning my family. They fully expected me to be at home crying in the dark, broken by their coordinated social media smear campaign. They certainly did not expect me to walk into the lion den wearing a midnight blue designer power suit, looking like I owned the entire building. My mother, Patricia, was standing near the center of the polished wooden dance floor, holding court with a group of her superficial neighborhood friends. She was wearing a heavily beaded floor-length silver gown that easily cost $3,000. It caught the light with every step she took, a walking beacon of fraudulent luxury. When she finally spotted me descending the stairs, her fake beaming smile instantly vanished. Her eyes narrowed into a furious, hateful glare. She had sent that invitation as a cruel taunt to remind me of what I lost. She never actually believed I would have the nerve to show up and ruin her perfect aesthetic. I met her gaze perfectly holding it across the massive room until she was the one who nervously looked away. I scanned the rest of the room and quickly located my primary target. Jamal was standing near the marble open bar, completely cornered by Uncle Robert. Jamal was trying desperately to maintain his wealthy tech founder persona, but his physical body was actively betraying his immense internal panic. He was sweating profusely through his expensive custom suit, dabbing his forehead with a white cocktail napkin every few seconds. His eyes kept darting nervously toward the main entrance, terrified that federal agents or process servers were going to burst through the oak doors at any second. The psychological torture I initiated with that single text message was working flawlessly. Despite his sheer terror, I could hear his loud, booming voice echoing over the soft jazz band. He was bragging to Uncle Robert about a massive upcoming corporate merger that was going to change the entire landscape of the technology industry. His delusion was almost pathological. Liam and I navigated through the sea of hostile glares and found our assigned seats. My mother had placed us at the absolute worst table in the ballroom, situated in the far back corner, right next to the swinging kitchen doors. It was meant to be a final petty insult, designed to make me feel isolated and insignificant. But her spiteful placement was actually a massive tactical advantage. It positioned Liam directly next to the venue's audio-visual control booth, completely hidden in the shadows. While the guests were busy whispering behind their hands and staring at my sharp suit, Liam casually stepped toward the equipment rack. He slipped the wireless receiver dongle from his pocket and plugged it directly into the venue's main high-definition projector system. A tiny green LED light blinked to life. We were officially connected to the massive drop-down screen positioned directly behind the main speaker stage. I sat down in my chair, crossing my legs and placing my leather briefcase gently on the table. A waiter approached, looking incredibly nervous, and asked if we wanted anything from the open bar. I ordered a glass of sparkling water with a twist of lime. When it arrived, I took a slow, deliberate sip. Brittany was nowhere to be seen, presumably hiding in the luxury restroom trying to fix her makeup after her meltdown at the coffee shop. I sat there completely composed, absorbing the venomous energy of the room. Let them whisper. Let them judge me. Let them enjoy their expensive crab cakes and their stolen champagne. They had absolutely no idea that the federal net was already drawn tight around the building and the clock was rapidly ticking down to zero. The dinner service dragged on for what felt like an eternity. Waiters in crisp white uniforms moved silently through the grand ballroom, clearing away the empty plates of filet mignon and expensive crab cakes. The soft hum of the jazz band faded into the background as the venue manager signaled for the main presentation to begin. The heavy crystal chandeliers dimmed slightly, casting a dramatic theatrical spotlight directly onto the raised wooden stage at the front of the room. My mother, Patricia, stood up from the head table. She smoothed down the front of her $3,000 silver gown and walked toward the stage with the slow, deliberate grace of a monarch addressing her loyal subjects. My father, Richard, followed closely behind her, looking pale and heavily sedated by the 3 glasses of scotch he had consumed during dinner. He knew the bank was coming for his house, but he stood there anyway, playing the role of the proud, successful patriarch. Patricia stepped up to the microphone stand and tapped the metal grill. A sharp, high-pitched feedback noise echoed through the speakers, instantly commanding the attention of all 150 guests. The ballroom fell completely silent. 35 years she began, her voice trembling with perfectly rehearsed emotion. 35 years ago, Richard and I stood at an altar with absolutely nothing but a shared dream and a relentless work ethic. We built this family from the ground up. We poured every single ounce of our energy, our finances, and our souls into giving our children the perfect life we never had. I sat at my table in the dark corner, taking another slow sip of my sparkling water. The sheer hypocrisy of her words was almost physical. She was standing in a venue paid for by my stolen inheritance, wearing a dress bought with my grandmother's money, lecturing a room full of people about her relentless work ethic. She paused to wipe a non-existent tear from her eye. The crowd let out a collective sympathetic sigh. Aunt Susan, sitting at a table near the front, actually dabbed her eyes with a cloth napkin. But the greatest joy of these 35 years has been watching our children flourish. Patricia continued, her voice swelling with immense fake pride. She gestured grandly toward the front table, where my sister and her husband were seated. We are just so incredibly proud of our youngest daughter, Brittany, and our brilliant son-in-law, Jamal. The spotlight shifted slightly to illuminate them. Brittany beamed, flashing a bright, practiced smile for the crowd. Jamal puffed out his chest and raised his glass of champagne, trying to look like the wealthy tech mogul my mother was describing. But from my vantage point, I could see his hand visibly shaking. The crystal glass trembled against his lips. Watching Jamal build his technology startup from a simple idea into a massive corporate empire has been the most inspiring journey, Patricia declared. He is a shining example of what happens when you combine true genius with family loyalty. He is about to close a merger that will change the industry, and he still makes time to be the perfect husband. We are so blessed to have him carrying on our family legacy of success. A warm round of applause erupted from the guests. Jamal offered a tight, nervous wave. I watched him closely, knowing that his corporate bank accounts were currently frozen solid by the federal government, and his fake legacy was about to result in a massive prison sentence. Then my mother's facial expression completely changed. The warm, loving smile vanished, replaced by a cold, self-righteous mask of martyrdom. She gripped the microphone stand tighter, leaning forward to ensure every single person in the room heard her next words. Of course, true love and family loyalty are not always appreciated by everyone, she said, her voice dropping an octave, taking on a sharp, venomous edge. This past week, our family faced severe financial hardships and emotional trials. We were attacked. We were betrayed by someone who should have supported us. We were forced to see how dark and selfish certain individuals can be when they are blinded by pure jealousy and corporate greed. She did not say my name, but she did not have to. She turned her head and looked directly through the crowd, locking her furious eyes on me, sitting in the back corner. Every single aunt, uncle, and family friend followed her gaze. 150 pairs of eyes turned to glare at me with undisguised contempt. The flying monkeys were silently judging the selfish, wealthy sister who refused to help her starving family. But despite the cruelty of those who tried to tear us apart, Patricia shouted, her voice echoing powerfully through the room, our love prevailed. We survived, and we are standing here tonight stronger and wealthier than ever before. The ballroom completely erupted. The guests shot up from their chairs, giving my mother a massive standing ovation. They clapped fiercely, celebrating her fake triumph over my supposed villainy. My mother stood on the stage, soaking in the applause, looking down at me with a triumphant, wicked smile. She thought she had completely destroyed me. She thought her narrative was officially written into stone. Liam leaned over and brushed his shoulder against mine. His hand hovered over the tablet connected to the wireless projector. I looked at the massive blank screen hanging directly behind my mother. Then I looked at Liam and gave him a single sharp nod. It was time. The applause was still ringing powerfully through the grand ballroom. People were standing on their feet, clapping and celebrating the grand illusion my mother had just painted. I pushed my chair back slowly. The heavy wooden legs scraped against the polished floor, a harsh sound that was completely masked by the cheering crowd. I stood up, smoothing the front of my midnight blue blazer, and picked up my tablet. Liam gave me a tight affirmative look and stepped silently backward into the dark shadows of the audio-visual booth, ready to execute his part of the plan. I did not rush. I walked with the slow, deliberate pace of someone who possessed absolute control over the room. My sharp stiletto heels clicked rhythmically against the hardwood pathways between the carpeted dining areas. As I navigated through the labyrinth of circular tables, the guests closest to the aisle began to notice my movement. The applause in my immediate vicinity started to falter. Aunts and uncles who had been clapping fiercely suddenly froze, their hands suspended in the air. They watched me approach the stage with a mixture of intense curiosity and growing dread. They fully expected me to flee the room in tears, entirely broken by my mother's public humiliation. They certainly did not expect me to march directly toward the source of the attack. I glanced toward the front table, where Jamal and Brittany were seated. Jamal's fake, confident smile vanished the moment he saw me walking toward the stage with a digital tablet in my hand. His eyes widened in sheer panic, and he gripped the edge of the tablecloth so hard his knuckles turned white. He knew exactly what kind of financial documents I possessed on that device. He knew I held the federal code for wire fraud. Brittany looked completely bewildered, glancing back and forth between her terrified husband and me, trying to understand the sudden shift in the atmosphere. My mother was still smiling brightly, soaking in the adulation, completely oblivious to my approach, until I reached the bottom of the wooden stairs. When she finally looked down and saw me ascending the steps, her triumphant smile collapsed instantly. The color drained from her face, leaving her pale beneath her expensive makeup. She gripped the microphone stand tightly. She thought I was coming up to apologize, or perhaps beg for forgiveness in front of the entire family. She leaned forward, her eyes narrowing into a warning glare that silently commanded me to sit back down. I stepped fully onto the stage. The glare of the theatrical spotlight hit my face, but I did not blink or look away. I walked directly up to my mother, invading her personal space. She opened her mouth to speak, to issue a quiet, venomous threat, but I did not give her the chance. I reached out and firmly wrapped my hand around the cold metal of the microphone. I pulled it smoothly from her grasp. She was too stunned by my sheer audacity to resist. She took a clumsy step backward, her $3,000 silver gown rustling loudly in the sudden quiet of the stage. My father Richard stood frozen a few feet away, looking incredibly old and terrified. The applause across the room died out completely. 150 guests sat back down in their chairs, a sea of confused, expectant faces staring up at me. The soft murmurs of confusion rippled through the crowd and then faded into absolute silence. I looked out over the ballroom, meeting the eyes of the relatives who had sent me hateful messages all week. I brought the microphone to my lips. I would like to propose a toast. I said, my voice echoing clearly and powerfully through the massive venue speakers. My tone was completely level, devoid of any sadness or anger. It was the voice of a professional auditor about to deliver a devastating financial report. Down in the dark corner of the room, Liam moved with absolute technical precision. He plugged the wireless receiver dongle into the main control board and flipped the master presentation switch. A low electronic hum vibrated through the floorboards. High above the stage, the massive high-definition projector flared to life. A blinding beam of white light shot right across the ballroom, cutting through the dim, luxurious atmosphere. The massive drop-down screen, positioned directly behind my mother, flickered brightly. It went black for a fraction of a second, and then it instantly mirrored the exact display of my tablet. The screen was 20 feet wide and 10 feet tall. Every single person in the room could see it with crystal clarity. The collective breath of the entire ballroom was sucked away. A deafening, heavy silence fell over the crowd. The jazz band had completely stopped playing. Even the waiters froze in place, holding trays of empty champagne glasses. The hijacking of the narrative was complete. and the execution was ready to begin. I looked at the massive digital projection glowing brightly behind me. The high-definition image displayed the official letterhead of my primary banking institution. The document was an $80,000 withdrawal authorization slip from the high-yield trust fund established by my late grandmother, Beatrice. At the bottom of the screen, highlighted in a glowing neon yellow box, was a signature that spelled out my first and last name. "My mother just spoke to you all about making incredible sacrifices for her family," I said, my voice steady and amplified perfectly by the venue sound system. "She told you about the emotional trials we faced this past week. She told you that I was the one blinded by pure greed. But Mom is absolutely right about one thing tonight. She is an absolute master of making sacrifices." I swiped my finger smoothly across the glass screen of my tablet. The projector instantly zoomed in on the signature at the bottom of the banking form. The loop of the capital N was jagged. The slant was entirely wrong. The pen pressure was completely inconsistent with my actual handwriting. For example, I continued, my tone dropping to a chillingly professional register. "She sacrificed my entire $80,000 trust fund by forging my signature on this withdrawal slip exactly 2 weeks ago." A sharp collective gasp erupted from the center tables. The sound of a heavy silver fork clattering loudly against a fine porcelain plate shattered the silence. My mother physically recoiled. All the blood drained from her face, leaving her looking like a terrified ghost beneath her heavy layer of expensive foundation. She opened her mouth to speak, to scream a loud denial, but no sound came out. She just stared at her own forged handwriting, illuminated on a 20-foot screen in front of her entire high society social circle. I swiped the tablet again. A new certified document appeared. It was an itemized digital receipt from the Oak Brook Heritage Country Club, showing a massive non-refundable deposit paid exactly 1 day after the $80,000 was illegally transferred into my parents' checking account. Just 1 week ago, my mother came to my apartment, sobbing hysterically. I announced, looking directly at Aunt Susan, who was sitting in the front row with her mouth hanging wide open. She told me my father made a terrible investment, and the bank was foreclosing on my childhood home. She begged me to cancel my wedding to Liam so we could get our venue deposit back and save the family from absolute financial ruin. Being a loyal daughter, I did exactly what she asked. I canceled my wedding. I willingly gave up the most important day of my life. I stepped closer to the edge of the stage, letting my eyes sweep over the sea of stunned relatives. But there was no bankruptcy. There was no foreclosure crisis that day. She forced me to cancel my wedding so she could steal my venue. She used the money she embezzled from my grandmother's trust fund to pay for the expensive crab cakes you just ate, the crystal chandeliers hanging above your heads, and the live jazz band sitting in the corner. She used my stolen inheritance to throw herself a narcissism-fueled anniversary party while I sat at home staring at my unworn wedding dress. The horror rippling through the grand ballroom was palpable. Uncle Robert, the man who had texted me calling me a complete disgrace to the family name, looked physically sick. He slowly put down his glass of expensive scotch, his eyes darting frantically from the projected receipts to my mother's pale, shaking form. The distant cousins who had harassed me online were whispering frantically to each other, suddenly realizing they had been completely manipulated. I swiped the screen one more time. A colorful collage of high-resolution photos appeared. It was the exact 13-photo social media album Brittany had posted just a few days ago, showing my family sipping expensive cocktails and lounging in private cabanas in Maui. Alongside the photos was the certified $25,000 wire transfer receipt to the luxury travel concierge. And before they came back to Chicago to complain about my supposed selfishness, I said, my voice ringing with cold, absolute authority, they used the rest of my stolen money to fly first class to Hawaii. They drank Mai Tais on a private yacht, while they allowed all of you to believe I was a cold-blooded monster, abandoning them in their time of need. That is the true definition of my mother's sacrifice. Patricia finally found her voice. "It is a lie," she shrieked, pointing a trembling manicured finger at the massive screen. Her voice cracked, echoing terribly through the room even without the microphone. She is a computer hacker. She fabricated all of those bank documents because she is jealous of our success. Richard, tell them she is lying right now. She turned to my father, pleading for him to save her reputation. But Richard was staring at the hardwood floor, his shoulders slumped, completely paralyzed by the sheer volume of undeniable evidence. He could not defend her because he knew this was only the beginning. The crowd began to murmur loudly, entirely turning against the woman they had just given a standing ovation. The illusion of the perfect, wealthy family was shattered into a million irreparable pieces. But I was not even close to being finished. I looked down at my father and prepared to deliver the second devastating blow. "Enough, Natalie!" My father bellowed, his voice cracking with desperate authority. He took a heavy step toward the stage, his face flushing a deep, angry red. "Turn that screen off right this second. You are ruining your mother's night, and you are embarrassing this family. I will not allow you to stand up there and speak to us this way." I looked down at the man who had demanded my fiancé sell his medical equipment just a few days ago. He was still trying to play the role of the powerful, untouchable patriarch, demanding blind obedience from the daughter he had completely betrayed. "I am not embarrassing this family, Dad," I replied, my voice echoing smoothly over the silent crowd. "I am simply auditing it. And unfortunately for you, the numbers are completely unforgiving." I tapped my finger against the glass surface of my tablet. The massive 20-foot screen behind me shifted instantly. The tropical vacation photos vanished. In their place, a dense official government document appeared. The bold black header at the top of the page read, "United States Small Business Administration Commercial Loan Agreement." I swiped again, and a bright yellow highlight illuminated a specific paragraph near the bottom of the page. "2 days ago, you marched into Liam's veterinary clinic and demanded he liquidate his assets to fund Jamal's tech startup," I said, projecting my voice, so even the guests in the very back row could hear every single syllable. "You told everyone in this room tonight that Jamal is a visionary, but you knew that was a lie. You knew Jamal does not own a technology company. He operates a fraudulent shell corporation. And I know you knew this, Dad, because your signature is right here on the federal loan application." The crowd gasped again, craning their necks to read the massive projected document. Relatives who had praised my father just moments ago were now staring at him with undisguised shock and disgust. In order to secure hundreds of thousands of dollars in federal relief funds, Jamal needed physical collateral. I explained, breaking down the financial crime for the audience, like a college professor teaching a masterclass. "So you stepped in as the personal guarantor. You secretly pledged the entire equity of the house I grew up in to secure a massive loan for a fake business. You leveraged your entire financial existence just so Jamal could buy luxury cars and pretend to be a Silicon Valley success story in front of your friends." My father stopped walking. He froze in the middle of the dance floor, staring up at his own signature on the massive screen. The angry red color drained completely from his face, leaving him looking pale and suddenly very old. "But here is the truly tragic part of your bad investment." I continued, my tone dropping to a cold, relentless whisper that carried through the speakers. I swiped the tablet one more time. A new set of documents slammed onto the screen. They were stamped with bright, glaring red warning banners. The words "account delinquent" and "final notice" were blown up to massive proportions. "Dad, you should not be yelling at me right now," I told him, staring directly into his terrified eyes. "You should be at home packing your boxes. Because Jamal has not made a single monthly payment on his fraudulent loan in 90 days. He took the federal money, bought himself a solid gold Rolex, and completely defaulted on the agreement. The bank officially initiated pre-foreclosure proceedings on your house yesterday morning. A massive lien has been placed on your property." The absolute finality of my words struck him like a physical blow. He realized I had pulled the county property records. He realized his darkest secret was completely exposed to the entire world. "While you are standing here drinking expensive champagne paid for with my stolen inheritance, I announced the bank is actively seizing your house. You are officially homeless." My father let out a strange, choked gasp. He clutched his chest, his hands trembling violently. His knees buckled beneath him, and he collapsed heavily into a wooden Chiavari chair at the nearest table. He buried his face in his hands, his chest heaving with panicked, ragged breaths. My mother stood on the stage completely paralyzed, staring in sheer horror at the foreclosure notice. Her entire identity was tied to that house and her social status. Now she had absolutely nothing. Suddenly, a piercing shriek shattered the heavy silence in the ballroom. "That is a lie." I looked out toward the front table. Brittany had jumped up from her seat, knocking her crystal water glass over in the process. Her face was contorted with panic and fury. She pointed a shaking finger at the projector screen, refusing to accept reality. "You are manipulating those documents." "Natalie?" Brittany screamed, her voice hysterical, echoing terribly across the room. "Jamal is a millionaire. He is closing a massive Series A funding round this week. You are just trying to ruin his reputation because you are a jealous, bitter person. Tell them, Jamal. Tell them she is lying right now." She turned desperately to her husband, expecting him to stand up and defend his honor. She expected him to shout me down and prove his wealth to the room. I looked at Jamal from the stage, my eyes locking onto his sweating, terrified face. He was hyperventilating, his chest rising and falling rapidly under his custom suit. I did not even need to argue with my sister. I just needed to hand Jamal the shovel and watch him dig his own grave. The psychological pressure finally shattered Jamal's fragile facade. The room watched in stunned silence as the wealthy, confident tech founder completely snapped. He let out a primal, desperate roar that echoed terribly over the quiet murmurs of the crowd. He violently shoved his chair backward, sending it crashing loudly onto the polished hardwood floor. He did not care about his carefully crafted image anymore. He only cared about the digital tablet in my hand. He knew that device was the source of his total destruction, and his panicked brain convinced him that smashing it would somehow erase the federal records. He sprinted toward the stage, his face twisted into a mask of pure, unadulterated panic. He was moving fast, his expensive leather shoes slipping slightly on the polished floorboards. "You shut your mouth!" he screamed wildly, reaching his arms out as he closed the distance to the wooden steps. "Give me that device right now." I did not flinch. I did not take a single step backward. I did not even raise my hands to defend myself. I knew I was perfectly safe. Before Jamal's foot could even touch the first wooden stair, a tall, broad shadow detached itself from the dark corner near the audio-visual booth. Liam moved with a terrifying, silent speed. People often forget that my fiancé spends his days wrestling large, frightened animals onto examination tables. He possesses a calm, functional strength that a man wearing a custom linen suit could never possibly match. Liam intercepted Jamal mid-stride. He did not throw a punch. He simply grabbed the lapels of Jamal's expensive tailored jacket, stepped into his center of gravity, and smoothly swept his leg. The physics were flawless. Jamal hit the hardwood floor with a massive, breathless thud. Before he could even register what had happened, Liam smoothly twisted Jamal's arm behind his back and pinned him flat against the floorboards. Liam pressed his knee firmly between Jamal's shoulder blades, neutralizing him entirely with zero visible effort. "Do not move." Liam warned, his voice incredibly calm, but carrying a dark, dangerous edge that made the closest guests take a terrified step back. "Stay exactly where you are, Jamal." Jamal thrashed wildly against the floor, his pristine white shirt instantly covered in dust and spilled champagne. He grunted and swore, trying to break free, but Liam held him down like he was absolutely nothing. The great Silicon Valley visionary was reduced to a squirming, pathetic mess at the foot of my stage. I looked down at him for a brief second, and then turned my attention back to my tablet. I swiped the glass screen one final time. The massive projector behind me flashed bright white before displaying the ultimate weapon in my arsenal. The document dominating the 20-foot screen was not a bank statement or a property record. It was an official federal indictment file. The heavy, intimidating seal of the Office of Inspector General glared down at the horrified crowd in stark black and white. Brittany wants me to tell you all about Jamal's massive Series A funding round. I announced, my voice slicing through the chaotic gasps of the audience. I gestured toward the screen. But the only round of funding Jamal ever secured came directly from the United States taxpayers. I zoomed in on the federal summary report highlighting the massive dollar amounts. Jamal is not a visionary tech founder, I told the room, speaking with absolute clarity. He does not own a technology company. He is a professional con artist. He created a completely fake phantom corporation to steal hundreds of thousands of dollars in federal relief funds during a national economic crisis. The crowd erupted into chaotic whispers. Aunts and uncles who had been praising his business acumen 10 minutes ago were now staring at the screen in pure revulsion. I tapped the section detailing the synthetic identities. He invented fake employees with stolen social security numbers to drain government money into his own offshore accounts. I continued. He used that stolen federal money to fly first class to rent private yachts and to buy that solid gold Rolex currently strapped to his wrist while he is pinned to the floor. I looked directly at my sister. Brittany was standing frozen at her table. Her hands were covering her mouth, and tears of absolute horror were streaming down her face, ruining her perfect makeup. The reality of her entire life was completely collapsing around her. She was not a wealthy socialite. She was the wife of a federal criminal living on stolen government funds. And worst of all, I said, my voice dropping to a heavy, unforgiving tone, he used my parents as his personal human shield. He manipulated my father into signing over the family home to secure a massive disaster loan, and then deliberately defaulted on it. He let my parents face homelessness just so he could keep pretending to be a millionaire. He is a federal grifter, and my parents sacrificed my entire future to protect him. The ballroom descended into absolute pandemonium. Relatives were shouting in outrage, pointing fingers at my mother, who had collapsed onto the stage, crying hysterically. People were pulling out their smartphones, snapping photos of the projected federal documents, and recording Jamal thrashing helplessly under Liam's firm grip. The toxic family dynamic had been entirely exposed to the glaring light of truth. There was absolutely nowhere left for any of them to hide. And the best part of the night had not even arrived yet. Jamal was still struggling beneath Liam, twisting his body and gasping for air. He looked up at the circle of relatives staring down at him and tried to salvage his completely shattered ego. "Listen to me." He choked out, his voice raw and pathetic. "She is setting me up. This is a massive corporate misunderstanding. I have lawyers who can clear this up in 5 minutes. Just let me up and I will show you the real documents." But nobody moved to help him. The uncles who had patted his back and praised his business acumen just an hour ago were now looking at him like he was a dangerous disease. Aunt Susan was actively recording him on her smartphone, her mouth pressed into a thin line of absolute disgust. Suddenly, the heavy velvet curtains covering the massive windows of the grand ballroom were illuminated from the outside. A frantic, sweeping pattern of bright red and piercing blue lights cut through the darkness of the country club grounds. The flashing strobes painted the horrified faces of the guests in alternating neon colors. The faint sound of heavy tires screeching against the gravel driveway echoed through the thick glass, followed by the short, sharp whoop of a police siren. The federal cavalry had arrived exactly on schedule. The massive oak doors at the main entrance of the ballroom did not just open. They were violently thrust apart. The heavy wood crashed loudly against the interior walls. A squad of men and women marched into the luxurious space, moving with terrifying tactical precision. They were not dressed for a high society gala. They wore dark tactical windbreakers with large bright yellow letters reading FBI and OIG across their backs. They were flanked by 4 uniformed officers from the Chicago Police Department, their hands resting casually on their heavy-duty belts. The sheer authoritative presence of federal law enforcement sucked whatever remaining air was left in the room. The chaotic whispering of 150 guests died instantly. You could hear a pin drop on the hardwood floor. The crowd rapidly parted like the Red Sea, scrambling out of the way and pushing their expensive chairs aside to clear a wide path. The lead agent, a tall, broad-shouldered man with sharp features and cold, assessing eyes, scanned the crowd. It was Agent Thomas Reed. He did not need to search for long. The massive projector screen behind the stage was still displaying the federal indictment file, glowing like a beacon, and right in front of the stage was his primary target, pinned securely to the floor. Agent Reed walked down the center aisle, his heavy boots thudding against the polished wood. He stopped right in front of the stage, looking down at Jamal. Liam looked up, making brief eye contact with the federal agent. Liam smoothly released his firm grip, stepping back and raising his hand slightly to show he was not a threat. Jamal gasped, pulling his arms forward and trying to push himself up onto his knees. He wiped the dust and spilled champagne from his face, looking up at the tight circle of federal agents surrounding him. Jamal Thomas Agent Reed asked, his voice completely flat and devoid of any sympathy. Jamal swallowed hard, his eyes darting frantically toward the main exit. "There is a massive mistake here, officer," Jamal stammered, holding his hands up in a desperate, placating gesture. "My business accounts were frozen due to a banking error, but my corporate lawyers are already sorting it out. I am a legitimate technology founder. I was just attacked by this man. You need to arrest him." Agent Reed did not even blink. He reached to his tactical belt and pulled out a pair of heavy steel handcuffs. "Jamal Thomas, you are completely out of time," Reed stated coldly. "Grab his arms." Two uniformed officers stepped forward instantly, grabbing Jamal's wrists and yanking them roughly behind his back. Jamal let out a sharp yelp of pain and shock as they forced him back down onto his stomach. The sharp metallic click of the handcuffs locking into place echoed perfectly across the silent ballroom. It was the absolute sweetest sound I had ever heard in my entire life. Agent Reed pulled a folded piece of paper from his jacket pocket. "You are under arrest by order of the United States federal government," Reed announced, reading loudly so every single family member could hear the reality of Jamal's fake empire. "You are being charged with multiple counts of federal wire fraud, bank fraud, and making false statements to the Small Business Administration. You have the right to remain silent. Anything you say can and will be used against you in a court of law." The officers hauled Jamal roughly to his feet. His custom linen suit was completely ruined, smeared with dirt, and violently wrinkled. The heavy steel handcuffs dug into his wrists, pressing painfully right against his solid gold Rolex. The ultimate symbol of his fake wealth was now locked securely next to the symbol of his federal imprisonment. He looked absolutely pathetic. His bravado, his arrogance, his loud, booming voice were all completely gone. He was just a terrified criminal caught in the glaring spotlight of his own massive lies. The moment the heavy steel handcuffs clicked around Jamal's wrists, my sister Brittany completely lost her mind. The illusion she had fiercely protected for years was being dragged away in front of her entire social circle. She let out an ear-piercing shriek and lunged forward, throwing herself toward the federal agents. "Let him go!" she screamed wildly, her perfectly manicured nails clawing at the dark tactical jacket of the closest officer. "He did not do anything wrong. You are ruining our anniversary party." The federal agent did not even flinch. He simply raised his forearm and firmly pushed Brittany backward, creating a solid physical barrier. "Ma'am, if you touch me again, you will be arrested for assaulting a federal officer and obstruction of justice," he warned, his voice booming with absolute authority. "Step back right now." Brittany stumbled backward, her high heels catching on the hem of her expensive dress. She fell hard onto the polished hardwood floor, sobbing uncontrollably. Jamal did not even look at her. He kept his head down, thoroughly humiliated as the agents pulled him toward the main exit. Watching her golden child's husband being hauled away like a common street criminal was too much for my mother to bear. Patricia realized she had completely lost control of the room, the narrative, and her own life. So she resorted to her oldest and most reliable manipulation tactic. She let out a loud theatrical gasp, placed the back of her hand against her forehead, and dramatically fainted right there on the wooden stage. She crumpled to the floor, her $3,000 silver gown billowing out around her like a deflated parachute. Normally, this performance would have triggered an immediate frantic response. My aunts and uncles would have rushed the stage shouting for water and fanning her face, while glaring at whoever had caused her distress. But tonight the reaction was entirely different. Nobody moved to help her. Not a single relative took a step forward. Aunt Susan simply crossed her arms and took a deliberate step backward, retreating into the crowd. Uncle Robert turned his back, completely picking up his glass of scotch and staring blankly at the wall. The extended family, the people my mother had tried so desperately to impress using my stolen inheritance, looked down at her unconscious body with pure, unadulterated disgust. They had seen the forged bank documents. They had seen the foreclosure notices. They knew she was a thief and a liar who had sacrificed her own daughter to fund a fake empire. They wanted absolutely nothing to do with her. My father Richard remained sitting in his chair at the side table. He did not rush to his wife's side. He just sat there staring blankly at the floorboards, completely paralyzed by the reality of his impending homelessness and absolute public ruin. After a few agonizing seconds of lying on the cold stage with nobody rushing to her aid, Patricia slowly opened her eyes. She blinked, feigning confusion, expecting to see a circle of worried faces. Instead, she opened her eyes to see two uniformed officers from the Chicago Police Department standing directly over her. Patricia Thomas, one of the officers, asked, looking down at her without an ounce of sympathy. My mother sat up slowly, her elaborate hairstyle completely ruined. "Yes," she whispered, her voice trembling. "Thank goodness you are here. Please help me. My daughter is trying to ruin my life." The officer did not reach out to help her up. Instead, he reached into his uniform pocket and pulled out a thick, folded legal document. He dropped it squarely onto her lap. "Patricia Thomas, you are being formally served with a mandatory court summons," he stated loudly. "You are being charged with felony identity theft and major embezzlement in relation to the forged liquidation of a trust fund. You are required to surrender your passport and appear in criminal court on Monday morning. If you attempt to flee, a warrant will be issued for your immediate arrest." Patricia stared at the legal document resting on her lap, as if it were a venomous snake. The last remaining shred of her fake high society persona completely evaporated. She curled into a tight ball on the stage, weeping genuine tears of absolute defeat. I stood in the shadows near the audiovisual booth, watching the total destruction of my toxic family. I did not feel an ounce of pity. I did not feel guilt. I felt a cold, absolute satisfaction radiating through my chest. The cancer had been surgically removed. Liam reached over and smoothly unplugged the wireless receiver from the control board. The massive 20-foot projector screen instantly went black, returning the room to its dim, luxurious lighting. But the damage was permanently done. The ugly truth was burned into the retinas of every single person in that ballroom. Liam took my hand, intertwining his fingers with mine. "Are you ready to go?" he asked softly. I looked at my mother sobbing on the stage, my sister weeping on the floor, and my brother-in-law being shoved into the back of a federal vehicle outside the window. "Yes," I replied, my voice completely steady. "I am done here." We turned around and walked toward the grand exit. The crowd of relatives parted silently for us, refusing to make eye contact out of deep shame and newfound respect. We walked through the heavy wooden doors and stepped out into the crisp, cool Chicago night, leaving the smoldering wreckage of their empire completely behind us. The morning sun poured through the floor-to-ceiling windows of my apartment, casting a warm golden glow across the hardwood floors. It was Sunday. Exactly 12 hours had passed since we walked out of the Oakbrook Heritage Country Club. For the first time in 33 years, I woke up feeling absolutely, completely weightless. There was no lingering anxiety in my chest. There was no heavy burden of obligation weighing down my shoulders. The toxic, invisible chains that had bound me to my parents and my sister were entirely broken. I sat at my glass desk in my home office, holding a warm ceramic mug of black coffee. The apartment was peacefully quiet. Liam was in the kitchen, humming softly to himself as he cooked breakfast. The smell of bacon and toasted sourdough drifted down the hallway. It was a perfectly normal, beautiful Sunday morning. The contrast between the sheer peace of my current reality and the absolute chaos I had orchestrated the night before was incredibly stark. My cell phone vibrated against the glass surface of the desk. The screen lit up, displaying an incoming call from an unknown local number. I had permanently blocked every single member of my family, including all the aunts and uncles who had harassed me, but I knew exactly who this was. A narcissist simply cannot accept silence. They will always find a way to get the last word. I reached out and accepted the call, pressing the phone to my ear. I did not say a word. I just listened. "Natalie, please do not hang up," a raspy, frantic voice pleaded. It was my mother, Patricia. She sounded completely destroyed. Her polished high society accent was gone entirely, replaced by the panicked gasping of a cornered animal. I took a slow sip of my coffee, remaining completely silent. "I'm calling from a prepaid phone?" She choked out, her voice thick with tears. "The police are monitoring everything. Richard will not even look at me. He just sits in his chair, staring at the wall. The bank locked the front doors of the house this morning and put a neon foreclosure sticker on the window. Aunt Susan told everyone in the neighborhood. I have absolutely nothing left, Natalie." She paused, expecting me to offer a shred of sympathy, expecting me to revert to the obedient daughter who always fixed her messes. When I offered nothing but cold silence, she launched into her ultimate defense strategy. She blamed someone else. "It was Jamal," she sobbed, her voice rising in pitch. "He manipulated all of us. He brainwashed your father with his fake business plans and his expensive suits. We were just victims of his massive con. I was terrified of losing the house, so I panicked. I was not thinking straight when I signed that banking document. Jamal made me feel like it was the only option. He is the real criminal, Natalie, not me." She was lying. Even now, standing in the ruins of her own making, she was incapable of taking responsibility. Jamal did not know the details of my grandmother's trust fund. Jamal did not know my banking passwords. She did that entirely on her own. "You have to call the police station right now, Natalie," my mother begged, weeping uncontrollably into the burner phone. "You have to call that detective and tell him you gave me verbal permission to use the trust fund. Just tell them you forgot. Tell them it was a massive misunderstanding. If you do not drop the forgery charges, I will have to surrender my passport tomorrow morning. I cannot go to a state holding cell. I am your mother. You cannot let them put me in prison. I will not survive it." I set my coffee mug down on the desk. The ceramic clinked sharply against the glass. I felt absolutely zero emotion. I did not feel anger or sadness. I just felt a profound clinical detachment. I was looking at a broken machine that could no longer hurt me. "Jamal did not force you to forge my signature, Mom." I said, my voice perfectly level and icy cold. "Jamal did not force you to cancel my wedding. Jamal did not force you to call my venue coordinator the very next day and steal my reservation for your anniversary party. You did those things because you are a greedy, selfish woman who enjoyed having power over me. You wanted to play the wealthy matriarch, and you were perfectly willing to completely destroy my life to buy your costume." "But I am your family," she wailed, the desperation tearing her voice apart. "No," I replied smoothly. "You are just biology. I am done fixing your mistakes." "Natalie, please," she screamed. I cut her off. "You made your bed when you stole my future to fund your lies." I told her, letting every single word strike with absolute finality. "Enjoy the floor." I pulled the phone away from my ear and pressed the red end call button, cutting off her frantic sobbing mid-sentence. I navigated to my settings and permanently blocked the prepaid number. But I did not stop there. I opened my contacts list. I scrolled to my mother's name and hit delete. I scrolled to my father's name and hit delete. I erased Brittany and Jamal. I deleted every single flying monkey aunt and uncle who had ever made me feel less than human. I wiped them from my digital life just as completely as I had wiped them from my emotional life. I set the phone down, feeling a massive rush of pure, absolute freedom. The execution was over. I stood up from my desk, walked out of the home office, and headed into the kitchen to eat breakfast with my true family. 3 months passed since the grand ballroom of the Oakbrook Heritage Country Club became the graveyard of my family's fraudulent empire. I did not spend those 90 days checking up on them. I did not stalk their social media or ask mutual acquaintances for updates. When you completely liquidate a toxic asset, you do not check the stock price the next day. But in a highly connected city like Chicago, the news of a massive federal takedown has a way of finding you regardless. Jamal was denied bail at his very first federal arraignment hearing. Agent Reed successfully argued that a man who fabricates synthetic identities and wires government funds into offshore cryptocurrency wallets is the ultimate flight risk. Jamal is currently sitting in the Metropolitan Correctional Center downtown, wearing a standard-issue orange jumpsuit instead of his custom linen suits. His fraudulent company Nexus Dynamics was completely dismantled by the Office of Inspector General. The federal prosecutors offered him a plea deal, but even with the deal, he is facing a mandatory minimum of 15 years in federal prison. He will be almost 50 years old by the time he takes his next breath as a free man. The solid gold Rolex was seized as evidence of money laundering and auctioned off by the government. My parents faced an equally brutal reality. The bank did not offer my father an extension on his defaulted disaster loan. The pre-foreclosure rapidly turned into a full asset seizure. The beautiful 4-bedroom colonial house with the manicured lawn, the house my mother used as the ultimate symbol of her superiority, was auctioned off to a commercial real estate developer. My parents were given exactly 14 days to pack up their entire lives and vacate the premises. They are now renting a cramped, dimly lit 2-bedroom apartment located right next to a noisy interstate highway. My mother, Patricia, surrendered her passport the Monday after the gala, just as the police officer instructed. The state prosecutor charged her with felony identity theft and major embezzlement. To avoid actual prison time, she was forced to plead guilty and accept 5 years of heavily monitored probation, along with a strict court order to pay complete restitution for the $80,000 she stole from my trust fund. Because they are completely drowning in legal fees and massive restitution payments, they have absolutely no disposable income. There are no more luxury vacations to Hawaii. There are no more expensive country club dinners. My father took a menial job managing a local hardware store just to keep the lights on and pay the lawyers. Their high society friends completely abandoned them the moment the foreclosure notice became public knowledge. My sister Brittany experienced the hardest fall of all. For her entire life, she was the golden child insulated from consequence and funded by the stolen labor of others. When the federal government froze Jamal's bank accounts, they seized everything purchased with the stolen funds. They repossessed her luxury SUV and seized her designer jewelry. She was left with absolutely nothing. Her carefully curated social media presence vanished overnight. She permanently deleted her Facebook and TikTok accounts after the local news stations picked up the story of her husband's federal indictment. Just last week, Liam was driving through a neighboring suburb and stopped at a local grocery store to pick up some supplies for his veterinary clinic. He saw Brittany standing behind register number 4, wearing a green polyester uniform apron scanning barcodes. The woman who once demanded I hand over the title to my brand new Audi so her husband could pay for a party was now bagging groceries for minimum wage. Liam did not take a photo. He did not go over to mock her. He simply paid for his items at a different lane and walked out. She was not worth our energy anymore. As for the extended family, the aunts and uncles who flooded my phone with hateful voicemails and called me a monster, they completely vanished into the woodwork. The flying monkeys scattered to the wind. Aunt Susan and Uncle Robert never called to apologize. They were far too deeply ashamed of their own behavior to ever look me in the eye again. The massive toxic ecosystem that thrived on gossip manipulation and tearing me down simply ceased to exist. They lost their gathering place, and they lost their glamorous leaders. I watched the ashes of their empire settle from a safe distance. I did not feel a single drop of remorse. My professional training taught me that every action in the financial world carries an equal consequence. They took a massive calculated risk when they decided to steal my future. They gambled everything they had on a criminal, and they lost the bet. The books were officially closed, the accounts were permanently settled, and my life was finally completely my own. 6 months after the Oakbrook Heritage Country Club incident, the harsh Chicago winter finally melted away, giving birth to a brilliant and vibrant spring. I stood in the bridal suite of a historic estate overlooking a massive private botanical garden. The sunlight streamed through the tall glass windows, catching the delicate embroidery of the custom silk wedding dress I was finally wearing. For months, this dress had hung in the darkest corner of my closet, wrapped in an opaque garment bag, serving as a painful reminder of the future my family tried to steal from me. But today, as I looked at my reflection in the antique oval mirror, the silk did not represent sacrifice. It represented absolute victory. It represented rebirth. There was no toxic mother standing behind me criticizing my hair or adjusting my veil to ensure I looked acceptable for her high society friends. There was no jealous sister lurking in the corner trying to steal the spotlight. Instead, Liam's mother, a warm and incredibly kind woman who had welcomed me into her family with wide-open arms, stood behind me. She gently pinned the veil into my hair and placed a soft, reassuring hand on my shoulder. She looked at my reflection with genuine maternal pride, a look I had spent my entire life desperately seeking from my own mother, but ultimately found in someone else. When the string quartet began playing a soft, elegant melody, I stepped out of the suite and walked down the stone pathway toward the botanical garden. The air was sweet with the scent of blooming jasmine and fresh orchids. As I turned the corner and walked down the grass aisle, I looked at the audience seated in the wooden chairs. There were only 50 people present, but the energy in the space was overwhelmingly powerful. There were no flying monkeys. There were no judgmental aunts or uncles whispering behind their hands. The seats were filled with my true chosen family. My managing director, David, was sitting in the second row smiling proudly. My closest friends from college, the women who had supported me during the worst weeks of the smear campaign, were standing near the altar in beautiful mismatched dresses. And standing at the end of the aisle under an archway of woven ivy and white roses was Liam. He looked incredibly handsome in a sharp navy suit. When he saw me walking toward him, his eyes filled with bright, joyful tears. He did not care about optics or social status. He only cared about me. I walked down the aisle alone, and I did not feel a single ounce of sorrow about not having my father there to give me away. You cannot give away someone you never truly valued. I gave myself away. I walked my own path completely unburdened and entirely free. I took Liam's hands and we stood together in the warm sunlight. When we spoke our vows, we did not just promise to love each other in sickness and in health. We promised to be an impenetrable fortress for one another. We promised to protect our peace, to honor our boundaries, and to build a life based on absolute truth and unwavering loyalty. As he slipped the gold wedding band onto my finger, the final piece of my broken past simply washed away into the earth. The officiant pronounced us husband and wife, and Liam pulled me into a deep, passionate kiss. The 50 people in the audience erupted into applause. It was not the polite fake golf clap of a high society gala. It was loud, genuine, and completely full of love. We turned around and walked back up the stone pathway together, hand in hand, stepping into our new life. We did not invite a single drop of toxicity into our garden. We left it all behind in the ashes of their own greed. If you are watching this and you are currently trapped in a toxic family dynamic, constantly sacrificing your own happiness to appease people who only view you as a resource, I want you to hear this loud and clear. You do not owe them your future. You do not owe them your sanity. You have the absolute right to cut the ties, to walk away, and to rewrite the entire narrative of your existence. Sometimes the trash takes itself out. And when the smoke clears, you realize that the best revenge isn't just their destruction, it's building a beautiful, untouchable life over their ruins. Thank you for listening to my story. If my journey resonated with you, please hit the like button and subscribe to the channel. Share this video with anyone who needs the courage to stand up, set a firm boundary, and finally choose themselves. Let me know in the comments below how you have built your own chosen family. Remember, your peace is your greatest asset. Protect it at all costs. Fade out. The story of Natalie dismantling her toxic family's empire leaves us with a profound and often uncomfortable truth. Biology does not automatically equate to loyalty. Society constantly conditions us to forgive our relatives, no matter the cost, pushing the relentless narrative that family is everything. However, Natalie's journey teaches us that blood is merely a biological coincidence. True family is defined by mutual respect, unwavering support, and the daily choice to protect one another. When the people who are supposed to be your safest harbor become the very storm that threatens to sink you, you are not obligated to drown with them. We often sacrifice our own dreams, finances, and mental peace to appease toxic relatives, hoping that our endless loyalty will eventually buy their love. But as we saw with the stolen wedding fund, emotional predators do not appreciate your sacrifices. They simply demand more. The ultimate lesson here is the incredible power of absolute detachment and self-preservation. You cannot heal in the exact same environment that broke you, and you cannot fix people who are entirely committed to using you. Natalie's victory was not just in exposing the federal fraud or the forged bank documents. Her true triumph was walking down the aisle surrounded only by people who genuinely valued her. She chose to surgically remove a diseased dynamic so the rest of her life could finally thrive. Walking away from toxic family members does not make you cold or selfish. It makes you fiercely protective of your own peace. You deserve a life built on authentic respect, not endless exploitation. If you are exhausted from setting yourself on fire just to keep toxic relatives warm, realize that your peace is your most valuable asset. Share this reflection with someone who needs the courage to finally set an unbreakable boundary and choose themselves today.